All right. Hey everybody, how's it going? I hope you're having a great Friday or Saturday in Daryl's case. Welcome to a 365 deep dive. We got a big show today. We're going to talk a lot about Microsoft Loop and into the Loopiverse. So we're doing a little bit of a play on like where everything is. Loop is getting to be like pretty ubiquitous. We had a huge announcement with the Loop app on Wednesday, was it? That it got launched in private preview. So we thought this would be a great, episode to bring on Daryl Webster and talk about all things Loop and demo from the Loop app. How you doing, guys?
Hi, good afternoon. Welcome, Daryl, to the show. Or
Didn't
I should
expect
say,
me to throw it to you,
good
did you?
morning.
Good
Good
morning.
morning.
Yeah, good now, right now, wherever and whenever you are.
Yeah, it's 7 o'clock in the morning for Daryl in New Zealand, and we were DMing with him at what was it, 3 o'clock in the morning, 3:30 in the morning.
About
So
that, yeah.
Daryl's bright-eyed and bushy-tailed for us today.
Right
It's
now, maybe
1
later,
p.m.
not so
here in
much.
Kansas City. Yeah. Cool. Well, so Daryl, you had a really great video that you launched like right whenever the Loop app came out. How's that video doing? Have you been getting a lot of
It's
traction
doing
on
well. Yeah, it's up to about 5K views. I
it? Oh
think
wow.
what helped actually was I also published a social video onto Twitter at the same time, just to
hmm
lead people into that video and start the conversation. I've always found the social channels to be a great place to start discussing things when it lands. And
hmm
yeah, some great conversations, observations, and feedback about Loop in those threads, definitely.
Yeah. Yeah. And you've been kind of prepping people, I assume that you knew this was coming on Wednesday, so you were prepping people for like the past week or two saying, hey, here's a guide for how to go in and do your prep work for your tenant so that you'll be ready to turn on the Loop app whenever it happens to arrive, and then the morning of it was like the embargo lifted, and
That's
you're
the
able to
one.
get that published. So people who are in the know, if you don't follow Daryl already, I put a QR code up in the corner. Which direction is it? Up in the corner. So if you're watching on a computer or on an iPad, you can just scan that with your phone, and that will take you to Daryl's Twitter page, so that you'll be in the know next time whenever something, especially around Microsoft Loop or really anything productivity in Microsoft 365 comes out. So be sure to follow Daryl. So um, we decided that to talk about all things Loop, we were going to do something a little bit interesting today. I'm going to bring my screen on stage here. We decided like let's run the agenda in a Loop workspace. So Daryl, kindly added us to his modern work mentor template or tenant, and he created a workspace for us, and we've been filling it out for the past day or so, kind of like getting our thoughts and ideas kind of ready to go. And we wanted to start by talking about what is Loop and then go into like how to configure it. So if you haven't seen Daryl's video yet, we'll run through like what switches you need to turn on to basically make the Loop app functional in your organization. And then we wanted to dive into like, using Loop, using the Loop app, but just also Loop components in the various places that you can use it. Show some tips and tricks. Daryl's got a lot of experience using Loop for weeks or months now at this point. So he's going to share a lot of cool things that you can do that are kind of delighters before we get into talk about the wish list. And like always, if you guys have questions, feel free to drop those in the comment field, whether you're watching on LinkedIn or Twitter or YouTube. We'll see those. And, that's the benefit of doing live video like this, is that we can have a dialogue and a conversation back and forth to, explore things and take it wherever you want to take it. So, anything to add, guys?
Is
Or
this
should we just
Christmas?
jump
This
on
feels
in?
like Christmas. I've been waiting
Yeah,
for
it
this
does.
since it was
Yeah.
announced in like fall 2021. Like I remember kind of behind the scenes learning about it and then the public announcement. And I'm like, yeah, I want this. And they're like, it's coming, it's coming. And in true
Mhm.
Microsoft fashion, they're like, it's coming in the fall, and they just don't say like what year. And it took a little while, but after having been hands-on with it, I'm even more excited now to use it than I was whenever they first announced it.
I know. It's kind of been the same for me too. Like Microsoft announced Loop. I personally, I hadn't really heard of this type of application. I don't know. Is there a word for what Loop and Notion and Obsidian, like all that stuff, kind of is? Is there like a Gartner chart yet for for this style of application? But
No,
I had never heard of this. Like having blocks or components. This kind of like organic collaboration, organic, just like getting things onto a page in a canvas type of layout. And what it did for me, honestly, was it made me learn about this like category of applications. So while we've been waiting on Loop, I personally have been like diving into Notion and using Notion a whole lot, which now that we have Loop available, I feel like I have a little bit of a jump start into using this type of application. It's not, no pun intended, a blank canvas that I'm staring at. I kind of know a little bit like what to do because I've kind of, can speak the language a little bit. But I'm interested, like from your perspective, Daryl, like how have you been explaining what Loop is to people whenever you, kind of do your intro to what is Loop?
Yeah, I try and dodge all the marketing terms and atomic units of productivity. I mean, it's nice. You can get poetic and start to think about those metaphors, and I guess that's where your mind goes. But
Mm-hmm.
I try to explain it as it is a new form of Office document, or should I call it Microsoft 365 document? Sorry, for those in the know, that's a bit of a pain. Um, I call it that because that's really what it is underneath it. It's a fluid file, a fluid document, and that
Mm-hmm.
becomes the collaborative canvas. So maybe I'd call all of these additional apps, Notion, Obsidian, etc., Miro, they're all collaborative canvases of sorts. They're live. You can share
Mm-hmm.
content with them. You can bring people into them, and Loop is that. Like I think as I start to explain it, and we'll get into this in more detail, it's all about how you can take that sharing across other experiences and work from wherever you are. And I mean, I'd also ask you guys too. Like, it was really interesting to see Microsoft launch the first experiences as um, Loop experiences without an app. Like
Mm-hmm.
it was this experience or a feature without an app, and it was kind of hard for people to adopt, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think like it was a little bit confusing for me because yeah, they announced loop components first. So they're really leaning into the collaborative aspect of it,
Mm,
where when I came into something like Notion, I've come into it from a completely personal productivity perspective, right?
mm,
And it
mm,
was like, Loop, it feels like from the beginning Loop existed to get work done together and kind of remove friction and remove barriers to, what, we're having a chat in Teams and we just need like a quick table, to jot down some stuff in like a structured layout. And it's like it's friction and it's kind of like context shifting to say, okay, well, I'm going to go into Excel. I'm going to make the little table, even though I only need like 3 by 5 table size. Then I'm going to save it. Then I'm going to paste it into the Teams chat so we can all add it together and all of that. It takes a lot of that friction out of it by just saying, like, all right, I need a loop component, I need a table, and then we could type at the same time. And we don't have to get out of the application to do it. So
mm,
I think it was a big benefit right out of the gate, but it was really seen from my perspective as like a Teams type of feature. It was very like,
yeah.
oh, it's in the umbrella of Teams. And if you listened a little bit closer to the marketing folks talk about what this is, that wasn't what they intended. I don't think they were saying, it's going to be everywhere. It's going to be an Outlook and Teams, and it's going to be, you're going to interface with it through different types of applications. But because like the practicality of it was in Teams, I think it's kind of had this stigma for the past year of being like
Mm,
a team specific feature, and I
mm,
think by getting the app out there, it really is going to kind of differentiate it and show that like, hey, it's kind of this underlying new collaborative architecture that the apps can take advantage of, right? These are just places where it's surfaced. So
Yeah.
I think it's pretty interesting to see it kind of come together. Um, what I'm hopeful for is that like they've got a big wave of like attention right now. I'm hoping that we'll see fast iteration to make that app, more and more mature as we go. So,
I'll tell you, when they first introduced it, my very first comment was, I have the notion this is going to be huge. And the pun was intended because I had seen and I'd worked
mhm,
with Notion a little bit, but I come from the SharePoint world and then I moved into personal productivity with OneNote. And I think this is helping to
mhm,
address one of the biggest frustrations that I think we've had with OneNote, and that's kind of the collaborative part of OneNote, the collaboration and some of the sync issues. Now, to that team's
Mm.
mhm,
credit, they've done a lot of work over that on the back end of that, especially over the last couple of years. But that's an application that was, it's 20 years old, and this is kind of the evolution of some of that. I know we've got kind of a what is loop table that we'll talk about here in a moment. But for
mhm,
me, like I think this is the way that I can start something and then extend it into the other parts of where I work, and it minimizes the friction in order to do that. It gives me a central
mhm,
place to kind of come back to if I can't quite remember where something is, and then I can push it and meet people where they work. And that's a new
mhm,
concept. Like that's taking information that like note taking, that's kind of a personal thing. But like if I'm jotting down ideas with somebody in like a OneNote notebook and then I need to go and reference that somewhere else, there's a barrier to do that. And this kind of breaks down that barrier so that we can kind of meet in one place, go and work in our different places and still reference something back in like that one place. And I think that's a really a new way of approaching some of this. And it's
Mm.
really cool the way that they're meeting this.
Yeah,
mhm.
that's I think key, really key, Andy and John. You've picked up on it too. Um,
Yeah.
Loop is about removing those barriers. I know, like it's deceptively simple when you add that component to a Teams chat or to Outlook and other places that we can do that today. But that's the point. It's like don't
Mhm,
get distracted by what font, what this, what that, even other buttons or things. Just get your ideas out there and start building on it, and then worry about formatting and form later. And that's why
mhm,
the components that we had initially for these first experiences, where you're in a chat, I'm going to give you 5 choices that you might want to use while you're in a chat, a bullet list, a table, or something else.
mhm,
Um, those are the components that get our ideas going and started quickly, and remove those barriers so that you can just quickly get that idea out there, quickly loop people in, share that content across other places.
mhm. Yeah, Daniel Anderson, I've got his comment up from LinkedIn. He says, the term collaborative canvas that you've used
Mm,
is really resonating well with the people that he's talked to. And I think that's a really good way to kind of explain it. Like people kind of get like the digital whiteboard space, and this is a little bit more structured than that because it's a
yeah.
little bit more linear, but it's very fast to be able to get like a new component added, and they've got a nice set. I hope to see it expand here pretty soon. But there's good functionality there that's a little bit more conducive to like us with mouse and keyboard, rather than having like a full digital whiteboard type of space. But still leans into that like collaborative canvas. Um,
Mm,
Daryl, you've got a really good picture right here at the bottom. I think you pasted this in.
oh, I
I
didn't.
think this is from your video, right? About like what the components of the Loop app are. I've got Loop
Yeah.
open right now, but do you kind of want to talk through like what we're seeing on the screen and kind of like the basic
Yeah, for
navigation?
sure. And just to help that focus, let's show one of those features at the top of the page
Hmm.
panel. Just tuck away the page list, top right corner,
Hmm.
up there. That's the one. Cool.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Um, Look, yeah, I think like with all apps, it helps to orient yourself with what you're seeing and what you're using. And
Hmm.
looking at Loop, um, your first experience of it when you do sign in, and I tried this yesterday too when I was signing in with a Microsoft account. Boom, you're into this getting started workspace, which is nicely mapped out to show you how to use it, what to use it for. And like I've tried to follow the colors of the Loop logo as we kind of go from one right through to 7.
Mm-hmm.
Just trying to point that detail out. That's the kind of stuff I do. Your page list and where you've got your pages, you're going to start out with a Loop
Mm-hmm.
workspace if you create one, and it is just a blank page. That can be kind of overwhelming. But as you build it out, this is where it does kind of feel like OneNote. That
Mm-hmm.
some of us who have got into it, I know Kurt and Marilyn, sorry, long time OneNote users. They're all watching the stream here. You've got pages and subpages. You've got sections, and
Mm-hmm.
that's the kind of pattern that we've been used to following. So that makes sense to use that within a workspace to pull our ideas together and organize them. The top of the panel there on the left, you've got
Mm-hmm.
a place to look at your notifications. We've already sort of tucked away the page to give a
Yeah.
kind of focus view and search. But let's just comment on these things, because otherwise I could just get onto a real like rant as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, I've had these
Jump in, guys.
notifications in the top. So you were like mentioning me yesterday. And so I
Yep.
left that bell unread so that we could show that today that, it's got its own notification engine. So
Yeah.
you'll see whenever you've been mentioned somewhere, and then you
Yep.
can filter that based off of what's read or not read. So I can jump into, like, Daryl mentioned me in this page down here. I click on it, it jumps me to where I was mentioned, and it highlights that, in purple. And because of that, it's not unread anymore, right? So Andy, he mentioned me over here, and then Daryl, he just mentioned me on the agenda. So as I'm clicking on these, they're falling out of my unread count, so I can filter back and forth between two of those. And I kind of like that. It's a lot like how Teams is, where it's tucked up out of the way. It's the same, kind of general UI element, that you're used to in like Teams and Yammer and all of that. I didn't hear a notification bell though. So
want
it's
that?
not quite as, like real time as Teams, where you get the ping, if somebody like thumbs up or something like
Yeah.
that. I don't think I would want an audible
A noise all the time?
notification personally.
Yeah, I mean, what would that
But
sound like? Would it be like a, sort of loopy sound?
I don't
Because I mean,
know. Hopefully
the little
not.
bell for the task would be done.
Yeah. Hopefully not that crazy sound that we heard when we were testing forms in meetings, and it was like
Right.
that
Yeah.
like space laser
Yeah,
noise.
that was odd.
But yeah, I just wanted to point out that, like, I didn't hear a sound when I got mentioned, so you keep track of that.
Yeah.
I'm curious though. Let me open up another. Let me just go to like bing.com. Can you mention me? I want to see, like, does it flash the
Okay.
tab or anything like that?
Yeah.
Or do I, let me click off of Edge. I'm wondering, like, does a pop-up notification come up or anything like that in the
No.
browser?
So nothing like that. What we're seeing today is
Okay.
you'll see notifications in the app, but I think the more powerful thing is when you're mentioned within the
Yeah.
notification email, and maybe you could. I know you've got a fresh account there, so feel free to jump onto an open tab and open up Outlook.com.
Yeah.
But that notification, it's embedding the Loop component. So when you go in to see, where was I mentioned? What was I doing? Or who's been talking to me? You're taken
Yeah.
directly to the content. And that's so engaging because it's right there, it's live, and you're going to contribute to it because you just can't help it. It's right there. There's John.
Yeah, and this is something that's really new. I saw this like in one of the blog posts. I think that this was a fairly new feature added on, that it used to give you a link to the Loop component and it would take you to that like .fluid file, but now it's rendering it inside of the email. So I can go in here, I can add right to it without having to again do that context switching. This cuts down on that. I can vote on Andy's thing, I can vote on Daryl's. And it's a lot like how like Yammer was like, you get a Yammer notification when you click on it. Now it gives you the latest and greatest comments. You can like and add comments and things like that without jumping away from the email. Getting out of your way, I think is really beneficial.
Yeah.
If I may,
continuing that tour. Yeah, go ahead, Andy.
I'd like to just address kind of an elephant in the room, and this right here, I think, really demonstrates that particular point. I'm going to bring my screen up
Yeah, man.
So this is a tweet from one of the engineers that actually worked on the product. This was a Twitter thread that was released. I found it last night, shared it with you guys. Really interesting about the history. But the first thing people say when they see Loop is like it's a Notion clone. And admittedly, they own up to that. But what you just showed is where its capabilities extend beyond what Notion is currently capable of. The fact that we were just inside of Outlook working with a Loop component that started inside of a Loop workspace. It's fully collaborative in both ways, and based off of the Microsoft security, and we'll talk about that stuff in just a little bit. But that ability to extend it beyond the workspace, I think, is huge, and we just saw that in that demo. But I just wanted to bring this up. They do own up to, admittedly, there is a lot of similarities with Notion.
Yeah, it's pretty Notion-y. Yeah, but like it's also important to keep in mind that like Notion's been at it for what, like 6 years or something. So naturally, I guess, yeah, it's going to be a little bit more mature. I'm personally not ready to switch over yet. I still have to I've put a lot of structure into my setup, but it's something to keep an eye on as they, as both of them mature. And like I imagine there's going to be like a cutover point where it's like, enough is there for me. Yeah, so I guess that kind of naturally leads into the second point, which is where can you use Microsoft Loop? We saw that you can use it in Outlook. Like if you're mentioned in a Loop component, you get an Outlook notification. You can also insert a Loop component into that into Outlook as well. So like if I go here and I click these dots, I'm going to share this whole page as a Loop component, right? So I'm going to make it portable, and I'm going to take it and go put it into Teams or Outlook or whatever.
Well, do that, John.
Yeah, that works
I've
the
just
other
started a
way
group
around.
chat.
Yeah, is like I can go into like a new email here, and I can send Daryl an email and say, check this out, and then I can slap that in, and again, it's going to render that, and I can send that off to Daryl. So I don't have to mention him in Loop. I can go through my traditional communications route, as well as I can do that from teams.microsoft.com, which is a new tenant. This is my first time launching Teams on this browser. So let's see the welcome page that comes up on it. Okay, get into the web version here. But, I copied and pasted that. It's still available in my clipboard. So I should just be able to paste it inside of this group chat. So Daryl and Andy, we've got this going. Let me get out of this. He's put a Loop component in there. I can paste the whole page as a Loop component. Does that render out? Nope, it didn't render out on that one. But I could do the Loop components, and I could add a new Loop component right here as well. Daryl, did you copy and paste this one in? Because this is from our
Loop totally. Yeah,
page.
so I use the share component.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't know. It's not working for me on this one, but I wonder if it's like something to do with the whole page or something instead. If I go in and say like, all right, let's grab that component that you had going right here, then I could click on this, create a Loop component, which is going to make it portable, to make it be able to come out. So I can copy that guy, copy it, paste it into the chat. Yeah, it's still not rendering for me, but it worked from Daryl.
You're in your account.
Yeah, he's more native, I guess. But yeah, the whole page is there from where Daryl copied and pasted it. It worked from Outlook for me though, so that's something. So where it's available, we've seen already, like Microsoft Teams. You can do it in chat. Can you add a Loop component or Loop page as a tab yet? I would imagine you can, just as like a website, but it's not going to be stored with the team. Is the important thing to call out.
Yeah. I think like early workarounds, when the Loop component experience would open up in the office.com page, and it was there was no Loop app experience. It was just kind of just this canvas and what you could do with text. So that's what some were doing early on to bring Loop content into Teams. but that
Mhm.
native experience where we would like to see a workspace as a tab in a channel, for example. And we know that's something that they're definitely working on, because it's, I mean, imagine that experience of being able to work together with 3 or 4 people and just getting
Mhm.
something done in a team, in a channel. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's not there yet.
Yeah, so it does work as a page, or like as a tab for a website. So what I did was I hit the plus button, I
Mm,
added a new website, and I pasted in our component link we've been working with. So
mm-hmm.
I have been able to say, "Hey, here's our loop page," and you see that it renders like the whole app inside. So that's something
Yeah.
to keep in mind, is like you've got a sidebar here and then another sidebar. You're getting into loopception here a little
Yep.
bit, like we said in the title, we're entering the loopiverse, right? Where you're like getting a little bit embedded, a little bit deeper here and there. But I do have a live, loop app linked to inside of Teams. But as you said, it's not stored with this group chat. This is still
Mm,
stored in the workspace, wherever the workspace happens to be located. So that's important to point out. We showed Outlook, also Microsoft Word and Microsoft Whiteboard. You're able to, again, just paste in that component link and be able to use this inside of Word and Whiteboard. Hopefully, it would be coming soon to things like PowerPoint or OneNote, things like that. I think probably the biggest one people would be wanting is OneNote, but it's not quite there yet, right?
It was
mm.
announced a year ago. They officially announced that in February of 2022 that Loop would be coming to OneNote soon. So we're still waiting on that one.
Okay. Yeah, that's going to be a really big win, because it's really going to stitch that note taking and the loop component, that collaborative canvas together.
Mm.
We're already getting a little bit of the collaborative canvas from a drawing perspective with loop integrated. So like here's my whiteboard that I just created. If I paste in, it knows that it's a loop component. So you can see it's rendering it out right now. And I've got that loop component next to my ability to draw, and I'm going to try to draw with my thing, but you'd be able to put like a voting table or something like that in here. Um, One thing I've noticed though is you can't create the loop component on the whiteboard. So you would be creating it somewhere else and just copying it into the whiteboard.
Mm.
Hopefully someday we'll see that as like maybe a button over here on the side,
Oh, it's about a
perhaps.
month or two away, John.
You
So
know?
it's in
Okay.
the message center. It's coming.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Hopefully that'll render here as like insert a loop component. What do you
Mm.
want? I want a voting table, and you just slap it onto the whiteboard. Um, that would be a big win. Right now it's copy and paste. So about a month away though, according to Daryl, and I'm sure that Microsoft would never delay. Um, the the other like main entry points for me for Loop are the web. Obviously, that's going to be loop.microsoft.com. You do need some tenant configuration that we'll talk about here in a second, to get that to show up. So if you're in a tenant that doesn't have it activated, you're going to see a message that says like Loop is not enabled for your organization when you go
Mm.
to that main page. Once you're in loop.microsoft.com, if you're on Edge, you could go up to this, the browser navigation, and see that little like kind of boxes with a plus sign. That is how you would install it as a progressive web application. So you can run Loop as like a standalone, quasi standalone application. That's what I've done. I've added it to my dock on Mac OS that way. And then there are mobile apps available as well. So I wanted to point that out. We can throw this
John,
in the
can I make a
chat.
comment about the
Yeah,
PWA thing?
go ahead, man.
What we found, and this is just, with us launching it internally at WM Reply, we're trying to get people on board for the private preview.
Hmm.
One of those frequent comments was, "Oh yeah, I'm probably not using it as much as I could, because it's just one of those many tabs that's open in your browser, and so you don't think about it. But when you
Hmm.
do install it as a progressive web app, a browser app, it has more presence on your desktop, and so it's one of the things that I will start as an app during my day. It's Teams, it's Loop, it's Outlook
Hmm.
in some form, and at least it's there, so it's ready for me to jump in and collaborate or take notes.
Yeah. I wanted to point out, the conversation in the chat that's going on. I'm trying to keep up. We want to like pop them on screen, but I see you guys are talking like crazy, which is really exciting. And Phil, especially, thanks for like answering questions in the chat. One of our good friends, Phil, he's like helping us out with the chat a lot. So we appreciate that. But yeah, on the mobile apps, I pasted into the chat if you're watching on YouTube. iOS is available now, but it's available in test flight. So you will have to install the test flight application, and then you'd be able to click a button to install it on your iPhone. It's important to note that it's iPhone only. I did install it on my iPad, but it's like kind of shrunk down because it's just a phone app right now. But Daryl helpfully pointed out to me that, hey, you can just go to Safari or go to Edge on your iPad and get the full experience, because it's a browser application. For Android, I put the aka.ms link in there. Also, if you're watching on a computer, go ahead and scan that QR code with your Android phone, and I'll make it bigger for you. Go ahead and scan that, and you'll be able to install it on your Android phone as well. So anything else to add about like where you can get to Loop and stories about like where it's being used? I guess I have one question. Daryl, you've been using this for a while. When you install it as a progressive web app, does it give you notifications on the taskbar or your dock? Does it do that? Or is the notification engine not there?
I'm not seeing the red dot or anything like that to say you've been notified.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean it's email notifications at the moment, and if you're in the app, you're going to see a little notification dot. I would hope that when we see it more integrated within Teams, that it potentially becomes an item in your activity feed. Much like other things as well.
Yeah, there's a good question from Maris in here that says, hey, how can I use this with a private Office account? Like it keeps telling me I need to use like a school or a work account. Do you know the story about that yet?
Yeah, what some people are finding is they're trying it out as a Loop mobile app on their phones, and it's only work or school accounts that are supported there, but a personal Microsoft account is supported within the web browser.
Okay. So it's kind of getting there.
Yeah.
But yeah. Okay. That's interesting to find out. It's funny because like some things roll out and it's like you can only use an MSA, and then some things it like wants the school or work account. Like Microsoft Designer is one of those. We're in preview for Microsoft Designer right now, but you can only use a consumer Microsoft account with Designer at this point. So, okay. So I guess moving on then into configuring the tenant for Microsoft Loop. There's a great video from Daryl that I posted here at the top. And I hope that you're seeing like that we've created these with some structure, right? So like I'm using like the header 2 right here. I'm using a link component. I've got another link to another one and then some like steps to do it. So we're kind of like trying to demonstrate the application as we go through talking points. But I just pasted in Daryl's video to the chat. I think it's been shared a couple times already. So step 1, go watch Daryl's video. Don't leave now, but go watch it after this, and you can set up your tenant. The second link is right here. I'm going to paste this into the chat, and this is the step-by-step guide. The more nerdy of us, that want to read rather than watch a video, they've got step-by-step what you need to do, and then I've kind of summarized this for you as well. So basically, you got 2 areas that you need to go to. The first is config.office.com. You're going to create a configuration policy, and you're going to scope it to a list of users. I know Phil said they're doing like a very limited pilot in his organization. So you probably want to start out small, grow from there. But you want to give it the ability to create and view files in Microsoft apps. That would cover you for like Microsoft Word. You want to add the configuration. You want to enable that configuration for Loop files in Outlook. Obviously, that's going to give it to you in email. And then the last one is create and view Loop files in Loop, which sounds a little bit redundant, but this is the Loop application. So this one, item C, that's what lights up the Loop app for your organization. And Daryl, you said in your video, it can take about a day, like 24 hours for this to apply, maybe a couple hours, something like that on average, but you might wait up to a day.
Yeah.
The second main component is to do it inside of Microsoft Teams. So the way you do it in Teams is with PowerShell. You go in and you run the set SPO tenant commandlet. And what you're looking to do is loop enabled. You're going to set that to $true. And then is collaborative meeting notes fluid enabled, which just rolls off the tongue. You want that to be $true as well. So did I catch everything, Daryl and Andy?
Yeah. I mean, I think you caught one that I'd forgotten on my video, which was that collaborative meetings one. And that's
Oh, yeah.
just making sure it's available for your group chats that are part of your private meetings.
Yeah. And, you can see from the word here that probably means that with the new note experience that's coming, hopefully, we'll have like collaborative agenda, collaborative action items, those types of things. They've got it right there in the name meeting, right in that attribute. So,
And that summary was brought to you by John Chat GPT.
yeah, right.
Really?
It's like I'm thinking as I'm writing the words out of my mouth. That's the funny thing about Chat GPT and all these like generative AIs is like watching it type, and sometimes it kind of stalls for a second and then it types more. It's like it feels like it's actually thinking. So that covers configuring your tenant for Microsoft Loop. Let's go back to the agenda here. And something else I wanted to point out, just because it popped into my mind, I'm like running 100 miles an hour, is you see everybody's face right here. So I can see where me, Daryl, and Andy, we're all in this location right now. But you see that Andy is also down here and Daryl's also down here. And what we have found is that whenever you're in Loop in a different like endpoint, I guess endpoint would be the best word for it. So if Daryl happens to have an email open that has this loop embedded in it, this loop component, he might be here in the Loop app, but he will also be here via Outlook. And Andy, he might be viewing this page on his phone, but he's viewing the agenda on his computer. So, you might see people in more than one place, and it's getting into the Loopiverse concept again of like, it's not a glitch. Don't freak out about it. It probably means that like these components are getting spread out into the sphere of Microsoft 365.
Yeah.
So it's going to be natural. You're going to see somebody's face show up twice potentially.
I want to be in everything, everywhere, all at once, John.
Yeah, right. That's kind of what we're getting to. So have you gotten feedback about that? I know you've been testing it like at your organization, right?
Yeah. I don't
Have people
think it
complained
actually,
about that at all or anything?
No, not so much. It's okay. So what's the main benefit of seeing someone's face there on a page or in the workspace? It is, hey, you're not alone right now. In your asynchronous work or synchronous work, there's someone here right there working there with you. And I think one thing that it also helps us to work with is this now, rather than sharing our screens, we're kind of doing this a bit more now. Rather than sharing our screens, we're keeping like a meeting open with that full gallery. We're looking at people, but over on our second monitor, if we're lucky enough to have one of those, we just open up the app. And in this collaborative canvas kind of way of working, we don't yet have cursors, but we do this in Loop. We can do this in Excel and all sorts of things. We can see where we're working based on the cursors or what we've selected. And so in a meeting where, we're working together, we don't share the loop on screen. We just follow where people are. I can see that Daryl's now presenting from this page. So let's all go there. And I can see when he selects a paragraph or a text or a cell in a table. So I'll follow along with that. Now we're kind of waiting for that cool feature that's landed in Whiteboard now. You know the one I'm talking about, John? Follow
No.
me? Follow me.
Oh yes, yeah,
Yeah.
duh. Yeah, the follow me feature. Yeah, I have that down as a wish list item that I think that would be really cool to be able to like, see the pointer. Like right now I can see Andy's typing because you get that traditional co-authoring, but with Whiteboard you get the actual pointer, it's like a triangle shape.
Yep.
But then, yeah, you said like to be able to present it, we ran into that just yesterday where we ended up just sharing our screen because I was like pointing to something with my cursor, but you guys didn't see I was pointing. You know, it'd be nice to do follow me. And naturally, if you do follow me, then you're probably going to need to add a laser pointer to this, right? Because like I want to be able to circle this with my pointer to kind of show this is what I'm talking about, you know?
I mean, I know it was Buzz Video, and this was 2 years ago, but remember the cursors were there.
Yeah, and they're the same styled cursors that actually have showed up in Whiteboard.
Yeah.
You know, that common design language. Something that I've noticed though, like you guys, if you were watching while we were talking about follow me, Andy was typing up here and he's in this cell, which in Excel, Excel, inside of Microsoft Excel, I would be locked out of that cell, right? Because he's editing that cell. But you can see he's editing it, and I was changing his spelling and like adding things while he is currently in it typing. So like 3 of us are in a single cell of a table typing. So you don't even have those types of like, you know, traditional limitations that we've had with the Office applications until now. I don't know if that's powered by like Project Nucleus or something like that to give like more seamless real-time editing. But it feels way faster than what we've known, you know, 3 years ago with co-authoring.
Who wants to get geeky?
Go on.
So there's a blog post where they talk about some of the architecture and how some of this is actually built, and it's based off of the way that they have restructured this inside of SharePoint. Part of the reason that it's taken a while for this app to be released, and if you didn't know, this app's actually been Loop's actually been in development for like 6 years. They needed to do significant re-architecting on the back end. Some of that affected SharePoint and how files were stored, and versus using like a traditional file storage structure. They're actually using a tree-based architecture with nodes, and it allows for more I believe it's horizontal connections between those nodes versus like the traditional structure. So there was a lot of work that went on the back end to make this possible, and that work is extended into many of the other applications. That's why you're going to see, I think, more of the Fluent framework and Fluent UI moving across, and some other apps have already been built out of it, like Whiteboard. But it's because of the way that they're handling some of the architecture on the back end. They can now allow more real-time collaboration like this, whereas before, like kind of a standard structure, it was built traditional like databases. And so like when a row inside of the database was like locked down for editing by one user, it made it really hard or impossible for another user to access some of that same stuff. I like the geeky stuff.
Yeah, it's so fast, like, and so like, pun intended, fluid to use this inside of the same. We're not locking each other out, things like that. You know, I hope to see this type of thing come across, especially in like, I don't want to throw any, you know, particular note-taking solutions under the bus, but like it's so painful to have to wait for a sync to happen when you're taking notes collaboratively, and this is just so much smoother. There's a really good question here in the chat that says, does that negate version control if multiple people are editing inside of the same place? Have you looked at version control very much, Daryl?
Well, version control
history.
That's actually the new feature, bringing that actually into the product. Whereas beforehand, if it was just a loop page with components, you could get there too. So you're seeing all the different versions of this page that we have been working on, and we can roll back and compare and restore. But the other cool thing, if you actually go into, what page are we all on there? This is still the agenda.
We're in the agenda, yeah.
Yeah, so go into the cell where we're all working on the Copilot stuff, and start hovering over some of the text. You'll actually see attribution. So click onto Andy GPT, for example.
Yeah, I see like Daryl typed that.
Yeah.
Andy GPT. That
Hover
was
over,
Andy and Daryl have messed with that one.
Then click on that. Exactly. Just now.
And it's got a win. Oh, okay. So I can't necessarily roll back that section. That's up here in version history, and you're rolling back the whole page for that. But you can see, like, since we got started, there's only been like 3 new major versions of this page that you would be like restorable. But yeah, if you can see like who said that, you can go look there and see their name.
Yeah,
That's pretty helpful. That's nice.
I like that attribution. I've just
Yeah.
taken off the highlighting on that text because it was hiding something that actually you can see too. That when you hover over,
Okay.
you can see,
Yeah.
okay, this is what Andy said, but then I hover over John's contribution. So I've already
Mhm.
done that. Sorry, if you just have a
People
click
near me.
into
That's cool. I haven't seen that before.
people near me. Sorry.
Yeah. So like Andy is here,
yeah.
right? And I can see
Mhm.
that you guys are there. So when I right clicked on this, there's a new like this flyer that says people who are near me. And you can see that list also inside of the contextual click as well. That's pretty cool.
Yeah,
Be
so
like, who's
clicking
here?
on a word where Andy was working, but we also contributed, you can expand
Mhm.
on that version. So Andy GPT,
Mhm.
and then just select yourself, your own contribution to that.
Mhm.
You see
Oh,
how
it's
it highlights
highlighting
exactly.
what was typed. Oh,
Yes.
that's rad. Yeah, because like so Daryl, he made it 2 words, Andy space GPT.
Mhm.
But Andy was the one who typed the whole sentence. And I just changed the word fast because he misspelled it. I put an apostrophe and I put a hyphen.
Mm.
Oh man, that's cool. So
Really
yeah, you can
granular.
kind of see it stepping up. So it's oldest to newest. The oldest is at the bottom, the newest is at the top.
Yep.
That's awesome.
So now I can
Man.
definitively prove I did not, in fact, say that. Somebody
Yeah.
else collaborated on my document and added
Yep.
to that thing.
So you need to take that, highlight it, and then screenshot that where it's like, okay, Daryl's the one that put a space there. Dude, that's rad. That's what I love about these like 365 deep dive. Like we've got a basic structure of what we're talking about, but we're also just like learning crap along the way together. That's super cool. Nice. So we've gone off the rails a little bit talking about like the features specifically, but what about like Loop and Copilot? Do we have a page for Loop and Copilot? I don't think we do.
We have a page, don't
Got a
we?
page about version history,
No, we
so we just
don't.
talked about that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I just added that in response. But Copilot,
yeah.
at the moment, I've seen it working in some of the early stuff that we have access to as Loop creators. But where is it?
Yeah.
If you
Just to
go
show you
to
guys
the
where that's at, you go to settings up here in the top corner and then experiments. You can turn on the jumpstart workspace option that is available now. So that gives you like some suggestions when you're creating your workspace. But then Copilot is grayed out right now because they're at capacity. But that's where you're going to be able to get like, hey, Copilot, give me, 2 paragraphs about this. Give me some ideas for a YouTube video title, things like that. And it'll just like spit out text for you.
So for those of you
You
that
can
are
learn
tuning
more.
in and just hearing about Copilot for the first time, Microsoft recently had a huge announcement about the Copilot service as part of Microsoft 365. The Copilot service acts as a processing engine, a universal translator between you, a user, and some kind of prompt or request to retrieve information. Copilot connects to the Microsoft Graph and looks for things that are recent and relevant and associated with you in the Microsoft world. It creates a prompt from that and it connects to a large language model. And the one that Microsoft is using is OpenAI's GPT-4 and Chat GPT. It gets the response back from that Chat GPT and it goes through the co-processing service once again, connects back to the graph to follow up with the information that it needs, and then it sends the results of that back to you. So you could summarize a response. So you could say, hey, I need you to summarize a report based off of this new product, widgets, Mark III, that we're working on. And it will gather that information from the Microsoft Graph. It will summarize and create a response for it, double check the graph information, and send that back to you. They showed Copilot in a bunch of demos with like Word, Outlook, Excel, PowerPoint, OneNote, and it's going to be here inside of Microsoft Loop. To say that I'm excited about Copilot is an understatement. I think that is revolutionary. So I had to interject on that one because
definitely
keep your eyes on Copilot.
Definitely follow Andy for a lot of things about AI. He's been spending so many hours every day just immersed in AI. And yeah, to his point, it was announced the same day, right? Yeah, so March 22nd, the same day the app was announced in public preview, they also announced that, oh, by the way, Copilot's coming here too. And this is just a couple of pictures of like what you're going to be able to see. So you're going to be able to have a prompt inside of a Loop component where you'll be able to say, I want to create something. I want you to describe some text already on there, summarize it for me, stuff like that. And here's just like an animated GIF of what that looks like. So you'd be able to like, activate it. And what's really cool is that it's the first place that I've seen the collaborative Copilot, if that's what you can call it, where multiple people are like prompting the engine inside of this collaborative canvas. So you can see that like, this person started out with like, hey, give us an agenda, an outline. And then somebody else proposed like, well, give us some more details. And then the other person said, well, turn it into a different format called an agenda. And like, they're going back and forth and they're giving that AI component, they're giving that commands, and it has the context from the other person before them. So that's what's really cool is I'm coming up with the right word to say, a shared context, right? You have the shared context within that generative AI, which is really, really cool. So yeah, we'll paste this in the chat as well for you guys if one of the guys haven't done it already. But that's the article. Yeah, I see Andy put it in the chat already. And there's some FAQs about like, okay, how do I get it? Where's it going to be? It's going to surface as a component in and of itself called Copilot. So that's
I have
really
a feeling
cool.
we'll be circling back around with a deep dive on Copilot as soon as we're able to get hands on it.
Yeah, like many Copilot D sessions, I think. It's just so broad. Holy cow. It was pretty game changing to watch that demo and see it like in more than just sizzle reel, like see actual demonstrations. It feels like they're way, way closer than what a lot of times Microsoft is when they make an announcement. It feels like that's further off. I think we're going to see Copilot sooner than what we saw Loop, for example.
Here's hoping.
Yeah, I hope so. I know you're waiting every day to see it light up. So I'm going to mark that as complete and go on through. We already talked about where you can use Loop, and then the Loop components. We talked about that. Is there anything else you guys want to cover on Loop components themselves? I guess there's a couple new ones that I thought was really interesting. I'm going to make a new page. So to insert a Loop component, the shortcut for that is going to be a /. It's the one that's falling forward. And this is where you kind of get that like contextual menu that comes up. And ever since like 2021, we've had headings and tables and checklists and different types of lists. But now we have two new ones that I've seen, which is the voting table and the progress tracker. So the voting table is really cool. I see this being useful in a meeting, especially where you can have like, what is your idea? Advocate for it. Let's brainstorm some pros and cons and then let people vote for it. And you get to see who voted for what. So that's a really interesting component. I'm wondering, Daryl, do you know if there's any configuration about like, can we make that voting anonymous? It doesn't look like we can.
No, nothing like that yet.
Okay.
You're on the page, so you've kind of voted.
That's true. You kind of see what people are doing as they're doing it because it's collaborative. Yeah. But that's a really cool one because it's just structured for pros and cons. And really, you could have done this with a table, and then you could have had them put like emojis in or something like that. But it's a nice vote button, which has like a counter. The other one that Daryl's adding right now that you guys have seen me use is labels. So if I go down here and I add a new one, I do / and then a label. This gives you the ability to have like a progress tracker or priority, or you can add a new label if you want to. So like, say that we're editing, like we're brainstorming an editorial calendar, right? So I'm going to do like content type. And are we going to do this as a, Viva Engage post? I almost said Yammer. Viva Engage, are we going to do this as a SharePoint news post? Are we going to do a video in stream? Are we going to do a live event in Teams? And I can save that. And now for this workspace, I've got a new label type where I can say like, all right, this is going to be a news post. And I can flag that little like label or that little cell right here by embedding a label into the cell. I can say Viva Engage and the status of it is label. The status of it is in progress, right? So you
John,
can add
what
these
you
little
want to
flags.
do here on that is actually, you could add labels into the cell, but you can add a new column type to a table called called labels. Yeah.
So tags or something.
Yeah, that's the one.
You could do labels. I'm used to using the word tags because like I just come from the Notion world. But yeah, you can have status.
Even better. I've just changed the the column type to labels. So now you can click into the column or the cell.
Snap. That's cool. Yeah. Okay, so you can, let's show how to do that. So up here at the top, I went to the little caret and you can change the content, the column type. And the type is a label. The label is, well, what type of label do you want? Because you've made a custom label type called a content type. You can do that. And now it's a selector, which I think that's cool if you're going to do like one label to one column. Personally, what I would do, because again, I'm coming from like kind of the modern way of just tag everything. I would kind of want like one catch-all and just put a ton of labels inside of it. Just because like I would want to filter by that, and I don't really care like what the grouping is. But yeah, that's a cool little power move, is being able to go there and make it a label.
There's one other thing about labels. When you're creating them, if you came up with your own label group, it's to that page. So if you've come up with a group that you want to use on another page, it's not going to be there at this point.
Okay.
I'm sure that'll be some kind of feature request in terms
that
of
seems like something for them to fix
for workspaces that I want to use.
Yeah, I want it for the whole workspace, because like the workspace to me is like a project, right? So I would want that to kind of be like the taxonomy of the project.
Why do I feel like we're talking about site columns right now?
What, do we need some taxonomy that we can use across our whole organization?
Right. No, you keep your managed metadata out of this.
All right.
Oh, that's totally. But I know somebody's thinking while they're watching that, like, can I have, an organizational library of labels, and I want to publish those to all of my users so that everything's the same? You guys are geeking too hard. That like we talked about friction, that type of stuff adds friction to the experience. And then what you're going to end up with is, back when I was back at Cerner, we had Jira, and Jira, they had added like 90 different custom fields to Jira at the enterprise level. So like every time you wanted to do something, you had to like scroll through a bunch of duplicate things, because like, the field was named like 2 words and then 1 word, and it was duplicated everywhere. So be careful what you ask for when you get like up to scaling at the enterprise level. Right now it's a page.
I do not want that in here. This is for ideation. This is for getting started. This is for notes. This is for brainstorming. This is not something that I want my organization interjecting in. This is for me to get my drafts going, to build up that material, and to have to interject organizational taxonomy into it would be beyond a buzzkill.
Yeah. Let's not kill the fun quite yet. What's nice about this is it's clean. So other components that we have on that topic, we talked about labels. I think labels is one of my favorite new features, but there's also progress tracker, which is another one of those type of pre-made tables for you, which is really cool because it gives you the structure. You've got different types, like this is a checklist, this is a date field, this is a tag right here. So this is a way that you could take this component. You don't even have to do it in a workspace, but you could take that component, put it into your team's group chat in Teams, right? So I'm actually going to go into Teams and just do this. So say that you've got a group of 3 people, me, Daryl, and Andy. We're all, engineers working on an engineering team. And you would be able to, I guess it's not available in Teams quite yet, but my hope is, the dream is, turn this into your daily stand-up. So what I would want to do is insert a loop component that is a progress tracker where everybody would put the 3 things, right, that are part of Scrum. What did you do yesterday? What are you going to do today? And do you have any blockers? So the Scrum Master can go work on that. Like, imagine like you could get away from having stand-up calls every day if everybody just did that inside of the chat. And also, there's like a ton of third-party apps in Teams that do that for you. But like, what if you had that just as native capability where you could say, hey, Power Automate, every day at 8 a.m., slap this loop component in there and let everybody do the stand-up without having to like stand around and talk about it. So that's kind of where I could see that going, Yeah, because you got the guy in New Zealand has to get on a stand-up with people in Chicago. It's like it's a little bit hard when you span the entire globe. So
yeah, well, we kind of used that concept in workspaces that we ran for projects. That the idea was we would try and update our status on a deliverable using a page for a deliverable. We'd update our status in terms of what we're working on and maybe the tasks related to that. So it all kind of became attached to the thing, and you just go there and work on the thing and see what the progress was. So it was quite useful.
Yeah. Marilyn's saying I could see that like spinning out of control if you had like a huge team. I think it depends, right? Like if you have a team of 30 people, you probably weren't doing a 15-minute stand-up anyway, where all 30 people talked. I almost see that kind of as being like more streamlined, because then everybody could be typing. And what I heard, I think I heard this on a podcast maybe, is that you can have up to 50 people editing a component at a time. That's the limit, is what I had heard.
Well, it's a limit on how many people you can invite into a workspace from a Microsoft account. That's the first place I saw that limit. But
Okay.
Traditional limits of how many co-authoring people can you have inside a Word document, that was 200 people at one point. So
Yeah.
I'm not sure about loop components and how many people you can, or rather loop
Yeah, I
pages.
thought I
and
had
how
heard
many.
something about that, like that it was like 50 or something. If anybody from Microsoft is watching and wants to clarify that, let us know if you happen to know what the limit is
I just
on that.
looked it up. The number of members in a loop workspace is 50 members.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I was listening, Readwise Reader. I was having it read to me out loud while I was driving on CarPlay, and I couldn't remember where that was. So thanks for clarifying. Bridget asked from one of the paired channels, can Loop be used with GCC subscriptions? Do we know yet if it's available in GCC?
Components, I think, are there in terms of your like Loop chat and Teams chat rather. I don't think it is, and it kind of goes back to why we had to configure and turn Loop on. That it was off by default for tenants. That that can be a discussion somewhere along here, but maybe now. It isn't fully compliant. It doesn't help you to run an e-discovery and find that content and rehydrate it and all the sorts of like chain of custody things in terms of documents. So I would say, I think that it's not yet available in GCC until that is solved.
It looks
Same with
like Loop
education.
components. Yeah, it looks like Loop components are not available in Teams chat, which is like step 1. But that is coming according to the roadmap in May of 2023. So hopefully that'll help you out, Bridget.
I think that's probably when they're aiming to have the compliancy tools ready as well.
Yeah, I could see that. Well, so purview compliance. Oh, that says feedback loop. That's not Microsoft loop. That's just an unfortunate
Feedback loop.
same word.
Side joke there.
Yeah.
You know, people say, "How do I give feedback on Loop?" And there is a sort of question mark in the bottom right-hand corner where you can click on a workspace and give that feedback. But we do know there's a feedback portal, feedbackportal.microsoft.com, for all the different products across Microsoft 365.
Yeah.
Early on, I said, look, we should actually create a namespace on that called the feedback loop for loop feedback. Sure.
Ah. Dad jokes.
Yeah.
I like that Microsoft's kind of leaning into the loop thing. I've seen them making jokes about like keeping you in the loop and stuff like that. So
Haven't heard that one before.
they know what they're doing. But yeah, that give feedback is right here at the bottom. So I was kind of showing that as Daryl was explaining it. That's where you would give feedback. All this helpful feedback that we're saying out loud, we should just go type all of it out. So that's progress tracker. The other one I think Andy was, or Daryl, was getting ready to do is the emoji picker. So
It's
we've
simple.
got emojis, just like Microsoft Teams. You'll notice that you do have the recent area, which is really nice because like I added the little music notes on the agenda, so it knows that I used that recently. My favorite one I've been using lately is they don't quite have all of the Teams ones, but there's a robot with sunglasses. I've been using that every time somebody talks about like AI, but there's a generic robot that you can use. So Daryl's talking here about mentioning files. So this is something that I found yesterday. You've got like the little helpful pop-up that comes up and you can add insert components, but you can also find things using the @mention, and it's not just people. You can see people up here, but it's also files. This is how you would @mention a file to insert that into your space. And because I'm brand new, I don't have like all of my OneDrive files, that it wants to suggest for me. But I imagine Daryl has a lot more that he would be able to paste in there to reference something else.
It's not quite working as I'd like. When you @mention to start with, you'll get 3 of your most recent files. And if you've been working in Loop a lot, you're going to see loops, of course. You click the button for files, and I would expect to see a list there. But what would happen is if you @mention like the name of a file, and start to type it. And I'm just trying to find one. Here we go, Project Radio. So that'll appear there, and it uses that little kind of chiclet of here's the document, here's where you'll find it. It shows the pathway through to
and this is also important to mention that because you add something to a page doesn't mean that you're giving access to it. So Daryl added that on his screen over there. I'm going to show his screen on the stage. He added that Word document and he sees it rendered, but what I see, I don't have access to this file. So it respects that underlying access to the files. So that's good to know.
What it doesn't do here, John, with that particular scenario is it doesn't, as I'm adding that to the page, it doesn't prompt me to say, hey, you might want to share that. And partly that's because this file is in Laura's OneDrive. Now, she's a demo user I have. But where it might have been a file I was owning, or maybe a loop component or a workspace or something, when I add that in, it's going to say, you haven't shared this yet, or you haven't shared this workspace or page with these people yet. Do you want to do that? Let's see if I can do that.
That would be nice. Yeah. If we kind of had that helpful Outlook type of hint, to let you know.
Have a look at this. I've just mentioned Elizabeth Swan. She's another demo user that I have back when I was into Pirates of the Caribbean. So it's an empty kind of sign there to say she doesn't have access to it, but click on it, give it, notify her, share.
I can notify her.
And yeah, exactly.
And so now she's an actual person. She doesn't have that dotted line around her.
But it only shares
Another
this page, not the workspace. So that's actually
oh,
good
okay,
too.
that's helpful to know.
Yeah.
Okay. Another thing I noticed here is like, so with mentioning the file, I couldn't get to it. So what I did, which we haven't mentioned yet, is next to each of these components, there's a little chat bubble. So you can do a quick emoji, like reaction to it. And you can also add a comment. So I added a comment saying I can't get to this. Daryl could give me access, and then he could add a reply. And can you mention somebody inside
Yeah,
the
I'm actually at mentioning Laura in that, and
Yeah, so
I'm
I
getting
could
that.
say, can you get to this? And I could mention Andy, and we've got a little chat going on inside of this loop component, about like, hey, I can get to the file. So that's pretty handy. I could do like a questioning reaction.
I'll jump in as Laura and give you access so you can actually see
So
it.
that's something that I could see you guys like running into out there in the wild is like, hey, rather than having, again, we're talking about like not changing context, rather than having to go out to Teams or go out to Outlook and try to chase down somebody, I could just leave a comment on the actual workspace, and it's that thing of like, I'm not getting out of my flow state, right?
You should have access now if you refresh.
Okay. So Phil says you can mention people outside the workspace.
Yeah,
So
that's what we're doing.
That was what we did with Elizabeth. Yeah. And it's like, well, they don't have access. So it's smart enough to know that, but it didn't go one step deeper into the file access. But if I refresh the page now at the bottom, there it is. It loaded up for me. So that's cool. Honestly, so to draw a comparison to Notion, I bet you with like Notion access, it would have done it like right away. I wouldn't have to refresh. I notice whenever I share things in Notion with Andy, it's like unbelievably responsive whenever like he pastes in an embed. I don't ever have to like refresh the page or something. But hey, I've got it now. And now I could like take that whole thing away. I guess I could probably delete the whole thread. Yep, that deletes the whole thread because I did the top level. So that's adding files, that's mentioning files, mentioning people, the emoji picker, progress tracker, labeling, tagging, voting tables. What else have we not talked about? These are all kind of like they've been around. There's also date that you can do. So you could do that. I wonder
Divider.
if you do that, it does at today. So it does that. Yes, I did do dividers for like where can you use loop. I separated them by dividers. I think that's pretty helpful to kind of structure your page a little bit.
You've got the images.
So yeah, you can add dividers and dates. And it looks like you can't do like a referential date, right? So you can't do like /date and do like tomorrow, and have it be smart, or have it be like in here with like a task list, have it be like a recurring every Friday or something like that. So it doesn't look like you can have date variables. It's more like an actual date. A little bit more static, I guess.
Yeah, in terms of
so here was how do you mention documents? Let's go back to that real quick. So to show that, let me get this all off a screen here real quick. So to mention a document, you would do the @ sign, and then the files show up right here. So it was like project Radia, I think is what it was.
Yeah,
and it came up.
It's
not a good
you for some reason.
It's not a good demo because like I'm brand new. But if Daryl scrolled down, I just put your screen on there.
Yeah.
If you scroll down and start typing it, you'll see it come up under suggested. So there's his file, and he clicks it, it inserts the file. The other thing you could do is you could just copy and paste a link to the file in, and then it will render it as an embed. And I'll show you guys that when we get down here to sharing.
There's a few things about those links too, John. And when you right click on them, you've got options about where you want to open it, whether you want to share
that's nice to see.
Whether it's a link preview, which is what we're seeing now, or just
Yeah.
URL. So I can
For
change that
URL,
back
which is kind of like just a text.
Yeah.
That's nice to have some functionality there.
Mm.
This is a good question, is where can I read about the security model behind Loop? Is
Top
there
question.
is there some good docs out yet for
Nope.
Loop?
Not yet. The
Okay.
best one, I guess, came out with that explanation around how SharePoint was behind it and some of the things that have changed. But it's definitely been a top comment from IT pros about, tell me about permissioning, tell me about the security model, and where is this stuff stored? We need to get into that at some point too.
Yeah, there's not really a Loop product area, unfortunately. So I've been searching here on learn.microsoft. So there's not a standalone product section for Loop yet. It's really like inside of Teams, how does it work in Teams? Inside of SharePoint, how's it in SharePoint? So they kind of need to bring that together into a Loop area, in my opinion. So, cool. Yeah, why don't we tackle that? You want to talk about like storage stuff? Kind of move on from components?
What's the best way to talk about this?
Yeah. I've got a little bit of just like a very high level, is that for the components, those are stored in your OneDrive. So the person who's making the component, it's going to make what's called a .fluid file. They're changing to .loop files, aren't they?
That's the plan.
Yeah, I
Was
think the
talked
plan
about
is it'll
just
change
about a year ago.
to .loop.
Yep.
And it's stored in your OneDrive. Now, one thing I want to show you that's like really helpful is on office.com, your Office homepage. This is really cool. If you're looking for Loop components that have been shared with you or that you've made, you can do a filter right here at the top of Quick Access, and your type that you're doing can be a Loop component. So now I've got a custom feed of all my Loop components on office.com. So that's really cool, like no matter where it was shared, but it's going to be in your OneDrive in, is it a folder? Sorry, I should know this.
Yeah, it actually depends on where you're creating the component from.
Okay.
If you're in Teams, it goes into your Teams chat files. If you're in Outlook, it goes into a folder called attachments. If you're in Word Online, it goes into Loop Word files. I don't know if there's one there for, no, we haven't done it yet for Whiteboard, but I expect that there'll be, again, a folder for that.
Yeah.
Bit confusing, but I wanted to also talk about that too, because one of the key things people were hoping for with the Loop app release was, okay, I've got all these loops now out there in the wild, all stored in OneDrives in my OneDrive. How do I bring that into the Loop app and see that? Maybe like it might be best to have a look at more of my activity, John, if you don't mind.
There you go, man. Yep, I switched to you.
So it was something that I was asking the product group about this. How do we bring these sorts of things in and make them part of workspaces? Over in my recent menu is going to show all the different Loop files that I've been working on. And you can see everything that I've been working on today in this workspace called in the Loopiverse. But if I go a bit further down, there's a couple of things that I've been working on for loops within an email. Somewhere down here is another workspace, and somewhere here is a chat. And so some of these loops are still in the OneDrive space. But what I can do is I can visit those and open them up. Or if I just go into probably this one. Yep. So I'm opening it up. I'm now, it's opening in the Loop app instead of in that office.com experience we had beforehand. And now I've got that option to add it to a workspace, I believe. No.
Copy to Loop workspace?
Yeah, well, there is that. I can copy the Loop component. I've seen it pop up in some places where I can go
I saw
add
it
to workspace.
over there. Yeah, like let me show my screen real quick.
Sure.
I saw it over here on the sidebar, the page. I could hit add to workspace, and then I could select another workspace.
Yeah. So you're going to see that when you're creating the page in a workspace.
Yeah, and now it's in both, right?
Yeah. So
it didn't move it; it copied it. Okay.
This loop that I'd created as a component in a Teams chat back in July, I believe, was also going to get that same share button, grab that component, or share it to a workspace. Now, it does mean that those files that are in my OneDrive will stay in my OneDrive, but one on the wish list is, hey, the cycle of this file that I'm working on, I now want to bring it into a workspace and keep it there somewhere where it's stored with all the other things that I'm working together with on my team. So I want to be able to move that loop file, and that's something that's, I guess, in development. It's on the wish list.
Okay. Interesting.
We haven't looked at the ideas space. That's another thing.
Yeah. What about ideas? Whenever you create a new idea, where's that one stored?
These are, again, still in... Oh, okay. I know I'm a bit all over the place here because we're looping all kinds of places. To back it up, in private preview, it appeared that loop workspaces were created in a SharePoint site collection. In fact, I could go through to SharePoint, for example, and I could see names of sites up here that were named after the workspaces that I'd created. Now it's almost like they've transitioned to, well, actually they're going to be out in a OneDrive styled space. It will still be powered by SharePoint, but I will not be able to visit that site like I could in private preview. I can't go in and see the file and folder structure. It's not something I can just go ahead and visit. So they're still kind of talking about it as if it is OneDrive, but powered by SharePoint. So when you create a workspace and you invite 50 people to it, it's still stored in your OneDrive space, but now it is contained and used by a number of different people. So back
like
to ideas.
So like I'm over here on
Yeah.
my OneDrive that's like empty. And I think this is what Phil was talking about. So I made a loop file in a chat. So it's in Microsoft Teams chats, but I added an idea. It's not in my OneDrive, but I've got this quick access area right here with all these like lists. And if I click on those, it says the list is not valid, but that's called ideas. And then if I go here, that's my getting started. And there's our into the Loopiverse. But it's nothing went, I can't do anything with that, but it like created what appears to be a site collection, or a document library of sorts.
Yeah.
And
Well,
I can't browse it like a normal SharePoint thing.
It is a site collection. In fact, when we have our own OneDrives, those are site collections too. It's a personal space. It's just it's not what we would consider traditional SharePoint. I don't think it will ever be a site that we will be able to crack into and use for other purposes. That would just be super confusing. But some feedback the community are giving definitely is, I don't actually want to see CSP bloody bloody blah popping up and crowding out all the other stuff that I use genuinely. So they are working on hiding that within certain experiences as well.
Yeah, Phil says like Microsoft's admitted that it's a bug and they're going to clean it up. Also, he says here, like, I kind of think it's just like some kind of storage container. I'm kind of like with Phil on that. It feels like this is the SharePoint equivalent of like blob storage, where it's like, it's just out there. Don't lose sleep over what's going on, unless you're in compliance, then you need to know things. But, then again, when it's in Purview, when it's in like all of these compliance tools, that's how you're going to be interfacing with it anyway. You're not going to be going into that blob storage and navigating it manually. You're going to be using your compliance and security tools. So just something to think about.
It's
all Azure SQL behind the scenes.
Hey, so as we're going through all of this, I'm live tweeting and sharing all the links and everything, and I got something that I want to bring up. So Shane has chimed in. He's the leading product management for Microsoft Loop, and so in the Twitter world, I was where can I read about the security model behind Loop? Part of the thread, TBD, and the short answer is it's built on top of Graph, Microsoft Identity, and SharePoint, and they're going to be adding some of the security and compliance features here in the the near future. So that's the kind of answer to some of the security and compliance that we
Cool.
have for now. But I just wanted to bring that in because,
Oh, cool.
hey, Microsoft, glad you guys are tuning in today
Are seeing that, yeah.
and playing along with us.
That's awesome. Cool. Thanks
is cool.
for that reply, Shane, if you ever see this. That's awesome.
They
Yeah,
should
so
see it, man. It's a massive feedback session, and we need to
Yeah, it is.
chapterize this video so it's
we're
easier
doing
for them
it
to
live.
traverse.
Yeah. So that covers a little bit of storage. We've talked a little bit about the confusion that I had and I've seen on Twitter about like, well, is it a central location? Is it creating a full-blown SharePoint? I got a reply too from somebody earlier about like, what about a group construct? Like my brain is programmed to be, to be in the mindset of like, when you do this, it creates a group, like I think Matt Wade's, not the periodic table, but the group, like how groups work infographic. Imagine him trying to add loop workspaces to that. It's like, it kind of breaks me a little bit to say like, it's not the way everything has been up until now. So I struggle with that a little bit personally. And I'm sure a lot of traditional people do.
Would you want to see like a collection of 50 different workspace Microsoft 365 groups that also provision a planner, also provision a OneDrive,
I know, that's the thing,
also
is like,
provision a SharePoint site?
If I go to Planner, I see all of my teams that are all dead and orphaned. Like I see all of those with no planner boards, so it's like, I don't think I want to see this get cluttered right off of the bat. But it just kind of like, as far as membership, it just like my brain wants to think in terms of like, that's creating an Azure AD security group. It has a mailbox for the workspace, but like, that's not what it's doing here. So that takes a little bit of adaptation, I think, for us who are kind of, I guess, old school M365, if that could be a term now. It's like we're in like next gen 365 right now. The Loopiverse. So, but yeah, I don't know where I was going with that. I'm just like, I'm struggling with it. So I'm sure other people are too.
I think it's definitely going to be important, as it's in preview now. There's a number of things that mean Loop app is not ready for some organizations. And this is one of those things that needs to be ironed out, is how does this work? How are they controlled? Where are the admin controls if I need to jump in and do this on behalf of someone? What is that all? How does that all work? And this is the kind of the gaps that need to be filled to make it truly enterprise ready, if I can say that.
Yeah. Fairy Geek Mother agrees. Please, no more groups. I mean, my organization, like you would not be able to guess how many groups there are in an organization the size I work for. So Phil says, I feel old enough as it is. Don't make me feel older. So
classic Phil.
So admittedly, as soon as I got access to this through Daryl's tenant and we were granted access to the workspace, the first thing that I actually did was I actually started drilling down into OneDrive to see what I could find. And specifically, I did the trick where you go into the classic mode of OneDrive and you can get to kind of the backstage area, which allows you to go into the OneDrive site contents. And for those of you who do anything with Microsoft webinars, there's a whole bunch of like lists that get created back here.
Document view.
So immediately I went here to see what I could find, if there was, a workspace file or something like that was kind of buried on there. And there's not. I wasn't able to. There's just a couple of the default OneDrive libraries that are actually stored back there. So just kind of trying to figure out what was going on behind the scenes in OneDrive. So that's the first place I was visiting.
I think our clue is that blog post talking about the new SharePoint storage platform, which I'm sure we're going to hear about at M365 conference. That, John, you said earlier, blob storage. Well, I think there's going to be this new type of SharePoint blob that offers that kind of that kind of experience and how storage will be used. Powered by SharePoint, does all the SharePoint things, but we're not going to be able to go and use it as an actual team site.
Yeah, you think that's going to be what Jeff and Dan and all them have been hinting at?
Part of it
is
yeah,
like they talked about a new look at SharePoint, so it might be reframing it for all of us. We'll see. So stay tuned for May announcements potentially. Okay, so yeah, some people are talking a little bit about like enterprise readiness. Just like, and imagine using this in school where people are like mutilating each other's content. Yeah, people messing with each other. Yeah. There was a question like up earlier that was like, I wish there was a way to share pages like read only,
so
that you could have like a wiki.
You can.
You can?
Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah.
if I'm going in here and I share a page link, I guess it's just regular like OneDrive style. So I can say in here, can view, and then I can share that with the whole organization, and then I could copy that. I could go post that on Yammer. Okay. Well, yeah. So you could kind of make like a wiki of sorts.
Yeah.
People
means
could,
that
like,
between
not mess it up.
us, we're contributing to the content, but we could make that loop live and available to across the org.
Yeah.
Via only.
The next question, is it possible to export it? I haven't seen any export options.
Or print it.
Yeah, that would like I know Andy's thinking in his mind like, what about Markdown? Can I export it as Markdown? So it's more
just don't
portable.
go that next step and say and regex.
No, just Markdown to take it to a blog.
Okay.
Yeah, or to Obsidian.
Where's the export to Obsidian button?
Yeah,
so disappointed.
Lift and shift to Notion. Okay, so we've talked about the structure, the storage stuff, version history. We've talked about that. We talked about the navigating, and what the components or the areas of the application are. So getting into sharing.
A couple things I want to. Can we go back to navigation for?
Yeah, dude.
Yeah, there's a couple things I want to go. Let me drive for a minute.
Yeah, man.
Bring myself back up on the screen.
Yeah, sorry, I'll turn mine off. I'm trying to get us to not be like multi-column.
Yeah, so just going through a couple of things that I noticed. So the first things first, creating a page. It's like go in, create a page, and I want to create a new page. So it's asking for like, a name right away. So like we'll call this directions. So first thing, like as I'm doing that, you see down here on the sidebar, it's naming the page, and it's got like a page placeholder that's associated with it. So like right away, I didn't pay attention to the things right above it. I'm very much focused on the thing that I'm in line with. So I'm like, well, how do I add like an emoji to it? Because Daryl had some really nice emojis kind of going. So I was like, well, let me just go in. I'll do my keyboard shortcuts like normal, bring up the emoji picker, grab, a map or a compass or whatever, and I'll drop that in. Kind of like we do in Microsoft Teams when you create like a new channel, put that emoji off to the side. So I did that, and then I noticed, oh wait, it doesn't work like that. It actually, there's an actual icon placeholder for it, so you can go in and rename it, and that's so right clicking and renaming it. That's one of the places that you can add the icon. The other is above it, where you can also do like, I guess, a banner image to go along with it. You can select from like an icon, and I think the terminology is don't go crazy searching for the icons. But I just wanted to point that out. Now we've got a custom icon that's at the top along with like the cover area, and then even in line you can still drop some emojis, but it'll kind of clutter up the sidebar a little bit.
You're kind of duplicating
if you do that.
Yeah.
So I thought that was kind of interesting when creating a page and like trying to look at some of the navigation. And then just going back, a couple other things that I noticed. I like, it's very subtle, but you can kind of see it in this right here. That's a screenshot of actually the sidebar, and like wherever you are, it's kind of highlighted in the white pill, but it's also giving you that purple vertical off to the side. We see the same things in Microsoft Teams in a number of places.
It's a little bit
really
higher
like
contrast for accessibility.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like when a whole bunch of people get in here and you're kind of moving here and there and doing things, like just figuring out like where am I, and just being able to have that kind of return to home sort of thing off to the side to like help me figure out where I am. And then going back, a couple other things just briefly to point out the workspace selector. So like these are all the workspaces that I have open. This is very reminiscent of OneNote, having multiple notebooks essentially open at the same time.
Mhm.
Here I can have a couple of different workspaces to switch back and forth between. But if I need to, I can browse all of my workspaces. And this is kind of the look and feel they're doing across like most of the Microsoft apps and
It's how
services.
like list looks
So
and stuff. Yeah.
yeah, so I like the flexibility, just being able to bounce back and forth between the different workspaces, because I might not always work in the same one.
Mhm.
This is the home landing page. We just saw that. The page and list subpage off to the side. I wanted to point out list format now, but we can switch back and forth into the tree view, which is or
Mhm.
the tree view and the activity view.
Yeah,
The
there was a
activity view is going to
question
bring the most
about that
recent.
from A Train.
Yeah.
That was like, where's the activity view? If you're looking at Andy's
Yep.
cursor right there, it's in the upper right corner of the menu bar on the side, the sidebar.
Yeah, so right up
Cool.
here. Yep. So you can switch back and forth, and that's really cool because it's gonna, if you do activity, it's gonna bring last open, last edited right up to the top. So when these workspaces start to get bigger, now I don't have to sift through as much to find out where some of those changes are actually happening. I thought that was just a really, really cool little feature, and I didn't even know it until Daryl pointed it out when we were doing kind of a debrief last night. So I thought that was cool.
Mhm.
Just a couple other things. This one for me is kind of subtle, but also like really handy. So like as I get into this, like we've got some over here where we're in the workspace, we've got a page, and then we got some like sub pages underneath it, or underneath it, and it's like,
Mhm.
where are you? I thought it was really cool they put in a breadcrumb at the
Yeah,
top. Like
that's
I
very
I
helpful.
admittedly, I'm a SharePoint, person. That's where I came from, and the breadcrumb was super helpful way back in the day. And then it
Mhm.
like went away, and that was painful. But to know where I'm coming from, or what's a level up, I really like that. And then this one was subtle. I noticed this when I was doing all the screenshotting. So if you pay close attention, you'll know like around my screenshots, there's a red dashed outline.
Mhm.
And what that's telling me is that it's accessibility. So I put in a picture, and it's telling, or it's giving you the opportunity to add alt text for those people that are visually impaired and might be working with this. So I thought it was a cool little thing. You can double click on it, and then you can bring up the alt text, and you can actually fill in what that is. So we'll just say screenshot of the loop breadcrumb. Now, here's the neat thing. If you add something in there and it's strictly decorative, you can mark it as decoration, and it's not going to have say it's a stylistic border, for instance. And so you can mark things that are just decorative that don't have any impact that the user that's reading your page needs to know about, and then it'll bring that dashed outline away. Now, this was a screenshot of that, and it did the same thing to the screenshot. So it's still going to have the red dash, but we did fix that. And so that's just how you can go in and enter some of the alt text, and you can even right click on that and add your alt text or mark it as decorative. And I just thought those were just some subtle little things in the user interface that were pretty cool.
Yeah, and applause for Microsoft with their continued focus toward accessibility and calling out. I mean, there's a lot of things that aren't there day one, but alt text is. And if somebody is, like has vision impairments and vision difficulties, that you would want that day one. So it's like, as much as we complain about things that aren't there on day one, at least people who are low vision can use this tool. And I've seen that it works with screen readers as well. I mean, that, like, kudos to them for caring about that stuff, because usually accessibility is bolted on later, and it's just really good to see Microsoft's committed to like putting that in at the start. So I'm glad you pointed that out, Andy. That's really good.
Yeah, I'm really glad they put that in there. My only
Mhm.
suggestion would be like if we could find some way to get some generative AI on top of some of that to help us to
Oh
build
yeah.
some of
Mhm.
those that alt text into it. I think
That'd be
that
cool.
would really be a huge boost in that generation, or
Yeah.
toward generating that for those users that need it.
Mhm. Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so that's navigation. Let's see here. Let's go back to our agenda and check on where we are.
I got it.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
you got it.
sharing.
Let me turn it off.
Yep.
Okay, so
Yeah.
yep. So the next thing is sharing workspaces, components, and pages. We've got multi levels of sharing now within Loop. So you want to walk us through that, Andy?
I'm gonna do my best, but I'm gonna lean on Daryl for a lot of this because as we were going through it hands on, and then even like we had a call yesterday where we talked about some of this, and then John and I continued on for a little while. Like it felt like Inception inside of Inception inside of Inception, and I don't have my token, so like I can't figure out like where I am in the dream. But all right, so sharing a workspace, screenshotted it just so you can see it, but in the upper corner, that's where the workspace share screen popped up, and then page links, and then the loop components. So share the workspace. So invite members inside of here. And Daryl, I'm not sure who else available in your tenant, but let's see if
I think we just added a couple more. So try Matt, M-A-T-T.
Yeah, I'd seen Matt
Stafford.
earlier.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so invite them in. Now that's going to give them access to the whole workspace, right?
Correct.
All the pages, all the components, and everything inside of there, and then we can go up to
But
the top.
not the
and we can see what we're
documents that
sharing
are
with.
referenced inside. So that's important to point out is like if there's a document that's referenced inside there or attached in some way, that doesn't, but all the loop stuff does, like components and pages.
Yeah.
So sorry to interrupt, Andy.
No worries. That's really good to point out because I was going to completely blast past that.
No,
I didn't
you're
even
good.
think about it. All right, so heading back to that, then there's the share page link. So we're on the sharing page, so I'm assuming it's going to just pull for this page, but I could also right click and get to the same thing in the left navigation. So this is the sharing menu that we're familiar with and we're used to in the Teams, SharePoint, OneDrive, Office, and world. So moving in through here, let me just knock everything off the desk. We can work with the share settings. Now, I'm going to assume that when we're sharing here, that it's going to use the same organizational defaults that we set in the admin center for the level of sharing based off of the link. So in this case, you've disabled the anyone link, and it defaults to people in the org.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's only
so we
going
make
to share that page.
Just the one.
Yep.
And then like we demoed earlier, we can go back and forth between edit and then we can make a view only if we need. Yeah. Now, my question for this would be, I've just generated a shared link for this particular page. How do I manage that shared link in the future?
Yeah, kind of like the shared from me section in OneDrive.
Yeah.
Is it available there?
Let's go through. We don't have anything
what it
in
is.
That sharing settings, Diane?
Shared by you. Shared with you.
Where we'd normally see that is actually in that sharing dialog when we go through those steps.
Getting back to blob storage, here's my screen. I went to OneDrive and went to shared and then shared with you. And there's the things that Daryl shared with me, which is in constant storage, doc, library, loop app data, this like generic container. That's where the agenda is right here, but it's in this like generic location. So there's that. So I'm wondering, Daryl, if it shows shared by you, do you see a whole bunch of loop stuff that then you could manage sharing from there? Or are you going to show from like the loop app, you can manage it? So you're in OneDrive, shared
by me.
So we do not see it in the shared by you section.
Kind of, this is a side comment. I want OneDrive to do a bit more like modified dates and times, but
filtering and stuff. Yeah, that'd be nice.
None of this is actually related to
those
what
would
I've
be
done
like
recently.
chat files. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, I wouldn't know how to get to that actually, but yeah, because we can't get to where the file is in workspaces, we can in OneDrive because we can go and find our fluid files there. But in
Yeah.
workspaces, we can't go to a file and say manage access, kill that link, stop sharing that.
Mhm.
Good observation, Andy.
Yeah, that is good. That seems like a little bit of a gap.
Hmm.
Wish list item.
Yep.
Okay.
I'm gonna tweet about that. So I got a marker brought up for that. There was a couple other things in the sharing to go through. I'll come back up on the screen.
Yeah. Yeah. Let me. Oops. We both flipped
There we
at
go.
the same time. Which somebody asked
All
in
right.
in the chat while you were tweeting that. Somebody asked like, "Hey, are you able to share multiple desktops and restream?" Yes. So we are each one of the three of us. We're sharing our screen, and then we're able to just swap that out by just dragging and dropping it from one to the other. So I'm kind of dragging it into the big space. But yeah, I love being able to have multiple shared pieces of content at the same time. Now you can't share more than one of your local monitors. It's each person is sharing one screen through Chrome or Edge. But I gave Andy some time to get his tweet out.
And I've added that to the
Maybe
list.
not.
I'm done. All right, so continuing on, some of these same things like the page link option, that was also available if you go in and right click inside of there. So there's the share page link that that pops up over there. And then we demoed earlier the share loop component. So we've seen that, but just put that on the page.
Yeah.
So going down here, so this is actually a component that has been added to the page, so we can access that in the page. But there was also a way to share it, and that's in the upper right hand corner, so we can see like who has access.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna hurry up and wait. Oh, you're not even seeing that menu.
There we go.
There it goes.
No, I see it.
Yes. Yeah, so who has access?
You know
to
what?
it?
Okay, so those are all 9s. Means nothing to most of us. But those of us who have seen SharePoint storage, you'll have a look at this and hover over. You'll see members, owners, visitors, and your own name. So let's say that the sharing or security structure is still based on SharePoint, but I think it's you're added to a members SharePoint site members group, owners group, visitors group. Because I don't see any of your individual names when I hover over that.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So do you actually see names when you hover over it? Because I'm hovering over it and I'm not getting anything.
No. I see a manager, a writer,
Manager,
a
writer.
reader, and an owner.
It's like it's got a role associated with it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, hold on.
4
You're seeing that
roles.
on your screen?
Yeah. Do you want to see it?
Yeah.
So, owner,
Because I'm not seeing that.
reader, writer,
I'm seeing that on mine.
manager.
Cool.
So that's a clue as to what the security roles are, because those are groups.
Yeah.
And honestly, like again, going back to private preview, those were the traditional classic SharePoint groups that you would find for a site for managing permissions.
Owner, writer,
so they
and
have
reader.
changed now to these 4. Cool observation.
We're seeing
All
a little
right,
bit of
so-
how the sausage is made.
Yep.
Cool. That's really neat. All right, so there was the option to share the component, and we can see that it's already out there. I want to focus on the shared locations though over here. So like I've shared the component from here, but they've got the Clover, and that actually occurs up at the top for the workspace, but also within a component. So I can bring that up, and then it says the sharing locations for this component. Now, this is something that I was hoping to get a little bit more information on. So like I followed that, but like I'm not really sure what it's showing me here, because What I actually want to know, and this is like one of my wish list items, is when I create a component here and it gets reused elsewhere, I'd kind of like to have some visibility into that. I'd like to have a backlinking maybe to that to understand like what document is this being used in. Like we're generating some task here. What Teams chat is that associated with? What email was sent out related to that? Is there another, say I'm developing a product and we did some brainstorming here and now we're starting to draft some documentation related to the product, Mark 1, Mark 2, Mark 3. Like how is this thing causing kind of a butterfly effect through some of our other stuff? So I was hoping that the share locations for the sharing component would show some of that information, but in this particular instance, it's not giving me that
I've
data.
just tried to generate a bit of activity there, Andy. Just try a refresh. I've shared that a link to that component in email and in a chat just now. And what I see is open the component shared in this space
there
right
we
here.
go.
There we go. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
a real concise URL.
And
right.
I'm
But at least we
also
can
now
see that-
seeing the Teams chat. So yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Moves through. Go. Cool.
all right. So that is helpful, but I'd like to see like it. I mean, it looks like we've shared in a couple places, and this isn't really giving me anything. I'm not really sure what that first one is actually for there.
Well, you
Unless
see
it's
the
backlinking
same,
to just the component itself,
just
like the individual component.
'cause- Yeah. So
Okay.
so back up a little bit. When we are inserting a component or creating a component from content on the page, we're actually ring fencing around just that content. I can share just this task list.
You've got
not the
that
rest of the
border
page.
to visually tell you that. Yeah.
Whereas at the top of the page for this workspace, the same Clovich sharing locations thing, it's trying to show. I think it's trying to show the source. Shared locations for sharing the page. So that first flag, I believe, is just the name of the thing you were sharing.
Right.
Shared locations.
So that's going to be the page itself.
Yeah. Whereas the component.
So a minute ago, if you were watching this later on YouTube, that's not the workspace. I said it was the workspace. So what it's for the actual page. So that's the sharing locations for the page. And this is actually the shared locations for that particular component.
Correct.
That's good to know. Hold on while I screenshot.
Well, that's intuitive.
Hey, this is going to make good blog information later.
It's not very helpful that the page we named is called sharing. So it's like, where is sharing shared in the share sheet?
Could you share more about
we've done it to ourselves.
We inadvertently stepped into that one.
Yeah, right.
All right, and then I guess we did take a screenshot of that yesterday.
Yeah.
All right, so that's what we had in sharing.
Yeah.
So
A-Train has a really good comment about that. That I think it's confusing that I can turn a page table into its own component, but it's really a page. Like we talked about that a little bit yesterday, Daryl and Andy, that like I think Microsoft maybe like kind of muddied the waters a little bit at the beginning in 2021, where it was you've got components, you've got pages, you've got workspaces. But then whenever the app came out, it's like, well, yeah, you've got components on the page, but like they're not really components in this page. You're going to turn it into a component, which then makes it portable to then move it around and put it in, Outlook or Teams or whatever. So it feels like there's a little bit of terminology confusion about like, okay, when I do the /, am I always adding a component, or is it not a component until I make it a component for sharing? At that point, is it a block or is it something else when it's like in a page? And I think that probably will need some clarification as we get more mature into like knowing what we're talking about.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have any thoughts about that, but I also found
Definitely.
that confusing, like A train.
Yeah, yeah, by talking about components being a thing you add to a chat or an Outlook, we knew as we started to explore it, oh, it's more than that because you go
Yeah.
in here and you've got a page and you can add more stuff to the page. So I challenged them on that, said, okay, we've got to come up with the right way we're talking about these things. And initially it was,
Yeah.
oh, it's just blocks on a page. But now that we can also turn those blocks into components themselves, everything on the page is a component.
Yeah.
This has shades of and I'm not throwing shade when I say this, but this has shades of Microsoft's naming conventions. You create a team in Microsoft Teams for a team. You have a group that you can add to a Microsoft group to a SharePoint group. Like we have a component inside of a component.
Yeah.
Like
Yo, dog, we heard you like components. So we put a component in your component so
Yep.
you can share it as a component in Outlook.
Yeah, it's like if you were trying to instruct a class on what is Loop and you're talking about the components of Loop, you have to switch to say, no, I mean, sorry, the parts of Loop.
Yeah. The modules
Mm.
of Loop. And one of them is called a component.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It, I think that's confusing. I think we've made it a little bit worse. It's like I was watching Ted Lasso, and like there was some word that he was like, "Is that how you say that word?" And he was like, "Oh, did a word become a sound?" It's like, what was it called? Like psychosomatic or something like that. Like when like a word becomes a sound. That's how it is with components. Like, well, when is it and when isn't it? Yeah. I'm deep into Loopiverse right now. Got to pull up a level and get back on track.
well, on that bombshell, should we continue on?
Yeah, I think so. I'm back to the agenda here. And let's look through our list here. So we've completed a lot of stuff. We've got what is Loop and Copilot, all these things I think we've talked about. We talked about the personal account
Not
stuff.
yet.
Well, a little bit of the
I've got it
personal
on
account.
screen.
Like, what are you talking about here?
Ready to demo.
Okay, yeah, talk about that.
Yeah,
The
I'll keep it
personal
quick,
version.
but
Yeah.
it certainly was one thing that the Loop team wanted to launch with a free experience as well. It wasn't just tied to Microsoft 365, but you could
Okay, yeah.
collaborate using Microsoft accounts. So you can go to loop.microsoft.com, sign in with your Microsoft account, and it will create a workspace, the Getting Started workspace. But I did sign up for a new Microsoft account with my demo user Laura, so we created that. I created this OneDrive-based workspace. So gone in there. And when I invited Laura and I said share the workspace, she has that same experience too. Can come in and open up the workspace and we're working together. And that was that first clue that I had that 50 people is the limit to a workspace, because it does mention it as you're inviting someone to it. If I was to go workspace and then add either of your OneDrive accounts, and I won't ask you to expose that, but
Yeah, and it has a counter right there.
yeah, 2 of
Yep.
50 have been added. Some of the things within this experience kind of do and don't make sense. We can do all the stuff that we've been showing in the sense of, adding content like tables, headers, and components. We can create those pages and subpages. But when you get into things like, I want to share this component and copy it into a outlook.com email and send it to Laura? No, not yet.
Not in the consumer version.
Yeah, I've got a anyone link
Yeah.
that I can share. Well, if we copied that and dropped it into a private browser, it's interesting. It's funny, right? Anyone, share this with anyone. And actually, in the fine print, it also says you don't have to authenticate. Well, what happens when I open up a new browser? I'm just anyone. I have to sign in.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
You need to authenticate.
Look at this namespace too. home.microsoftpersonalcontent.com/content storage/name of workspace.
Huh.
Yeah. So that's the pattern for your Microsoft account workspaces.
From a
Quite a long
personal
name.
side, yeah.
But yeah, I wouldn't spend too much more time on that. Just to say that you'll be able to sign in with your Microsoft account at loop.microsoft.com. The mobile apps don't support that yet.
Okay.
So there was some frustration with some people trying it out and going, oh, well, it's asking me for a work or a school account. I can't use it. But you can start creating here. The last thing too, there is no collaboration between a Microsoft account and an M365 account, a work account. So that's not there today. You'll be collaborating with just Microsoft accounts or just M365 accounts.
Okay.
Yeah. That's about it. We can move on to the next one.
Okay. Cool. So we covered that. Sharing, Andy just talked about sharing, so we'll mark that as complete. And then so a point for discussion is just Loop as a PKM versus using Loop for collaboration. So this is kind of interesting. So Andy and I, we've been geeked out for a while. I think you're also kind of in there with us about like personal knowledge managers, and that's getting into like Notion and Obsidian and OneNote and the idea of like building a second brain, or all those buzzword type things. I'm curious what you guys think about using Loop for like your own ideas, or what if you created a workspace for yourself so you've got structure, sub pages, things like that. Like, do you feel like it's ready for that in its current state, or do you think it's more leaned into for collaboration and like that friction-free collab?
I'm going to use a workspace for organizing myself personally at work. But probably not to the extent that I'm using Notion, for example. Like I can create a table to say these are the videos that I plan to work on, or I'm going to plan out my course details or some kind of outline for that for my YouTube channel. But well, I'd be waiting for things like a Kanban board or the task management that is kind of there in the product, and some people are having a look at it. Being able to synchronize your tasks from a task list through to Planner. It's that sort of integration which needs to kick in before we can truly use it, I guess, as a personal knowledge manager.
Yeah. Yeah. Phil's saying he uses OneNote right now. So he's kind of one of those guys that's like eyeing it as a potential switch, like what I'm curious, Phil, like if there's things in your list in your mind of like that are missing that will kind of flip you over the edge to using as a PKM. So yeah, agree with A-Train. Having relational databases would be killer for that. So getting into the wish list, I think it'd be nice to end on a positive note. So we'll flip the wish list into lighters. But the wish list that we've come up with so far, just to kind of hit them quick, because I know it's been a long time, is there's some lacking. I don't know if you have more details about this, Daryl, but I've heard in an enterprise, it's kind of the Loop app is a non-starter right now because of lack of like discovery, things like that. Do you have a specific list in mind of like what we need, like in Purview, e-discovery, things like that? I know some of it's supported.
Yes, some of it is supported, so you can do a search and find content, but it doesn't do the deep search that you want. And I think the key thing is with any of those e-discoveries and searches is the way that information is handled. There's a chain of custody that you've got to follow so that you're not actually ruining the evidence.
Yeah.
It locks it off, and it's not editable. And that's the thing with a loop file, is that while it might be gathered together as part of an e-discovery case, you can't access it and read it unless you drop it back into a OneDrive. And at that point, that's when it becomes editable again because of the nature of the file. And you destroy kind of like, well, who edited what and where's the version?
Yeah.
So that's really the key thing. Phil's mentioning here about DLP policies,
sensitivity labeling. Yeah.
Yep. So all those
Retention
things
policies.
that it's going to come because it's built on SharePoint technology. It's just they've got to figure out the rehydration chain of custody kind of feature stuff around that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We talked a little bit about group association. Like we talked about, like, I don't really want it to create a group every time I make a workspace, but it would be nice if I could invite a group of people maybe, or have some type of like common thread, right, between those two constructs. External collaboration, I'm sure that's something that's coming, the custom templates. So we'll talk in the delighters about, like, there's a few pre-baked templates in there, but me as a Notion user, I like that I can make any type of custom template I want, save it as a template, and make it the default template for that database. So whenever I add a new meeting note, it's got everything like in columns, and it's got all my action items and stuff like that. So they've got some good ones to start with, but I'd like to have like fully custom. And then like A-Train, like I think this is the thing most people are screaming about with Notion is have real databases with filtering and sorting, and each item on the list is an actual object in a database, and you can reference it from other places. I think that'll be a killer thing to add.
Microsoft list.
Yeah. If it's like a Microsoft list inside of it, you can have up to 2,000 or 5,000, whatever the number is now. Backlinking and referencing. I know, Andy, this is something you're passionate about, is like we kind of have a lack of like being able to, in other ones, what you do is you do like bracket, and then you reference another page from somewhere else, that would be kind of nice. I don't know if you have
Wiki
other styles of things that you're looking for there.
Backlinking is, in some products, backlinking is kind of a built-in feature. For example, Obsidian has it where if you have a page and it's referenced in another page, it'll tell you what the backlink for that is. Like, for example, if I do a wiki link and I create a new page and I go to that page to edit, if I go to the new page, it gives me a link up in the corner and tells me like where I came from, backlink to that other page. There's a way to do that in OneNote, but you got to use a plugin for it. There's the One More plugin, and it'll insert backlinks. But I think that's important. Like, I like the breadcrumb because it tells me kind of where I am. But if I get down into, I got a page and I'm building something, and then I got another page and I'm building something, like I could see an example of this. My team using Loop to manage things like our conversations and collaboration around defining governance for Microsoft 365. Like, we are the team responsible for the collaborative features in that suite. And I could see us using Loop for that. Well, if I start down a path on something and I end up 2 or 3 pages deep, like a backlink to the related thing would be helpful. The other thing about the links that I think is important is being able to get not only where you came from, but the association of like, okay, I have this thing and it might be connected to 3 or 4 other pages. I would like to be able to kind of see that in a single list. And again, some other products have things like that. And then with the One More plugin for OneNote, you can do that. And you can see this page is referenced in these 3 other pages, and then you can follow up from there. There's also, in the third-party world, like Obsidian, they have this thing called the graph view. And the graph view gives me a 10,000-foot view, and it shows me this, this is a page and this is a page, and they're connected. They're linked to one another. But it also shows me, okay, this page is connected to this one and this one, and it gives you concentration bubbles. And so it can say, like a mind map, one page, exactly, is this one page is really important because it connects to these 30 other pages. And then I've got another concentration bubble here and here. I could see, like, really when I start using this and like really getting down into it, not knowing what's connected. And that's why I think linking is important to me, is it's knowing where I'm coming from and what all it also connects to, so that I can maybe view my information a little bit differently. Maybe I can, structure my workspace a little bit differently. Or maybe I know this product, this widget Mark 7, was not only associated with ideas from widget Mark 6, but actually it goes back to widget Mark 3. And, maybe there was some discussion in 3 that we missed, and, it could help us to like maybe get better the next time. So that's what I think about when I think of like the linking stuff, like reference linking, anchor linking, back linking. having some kind of a visualization around that.
Yeah.
And we were looking at the Clover a minute ago. I just want a little bit more. Give me a visualization. Give me the graph view.
Yeah. So I'll cover these ones real quick because I added. So we already talked about follow me, the ability to like get into presentation mode and have somebody follow you around like during a meeting. For ingest integrations, what I would like to see. So to bring my Notion on screen here, like my kind of PKM process is to like get everything into Notion so I can take notes on it and things like that. So like this is Readwise, and everything that I flag as an article, when I listen to a podcast and I double click to like add a flag or something like that, it adds it here. So this is kind of my central brain storage, right? And I could take notes off of it. And so one of these, like if I go to the podcasts, there was the Work Lab podcast recently. And if I open that up, then this is coming from a podcast app to Readwise into Notion. And then from here, I'm able to take notes, right? And I've got all these comments on here. So I've got the snip that I did. It takes transcript. Then I can take it, I can highlight, I can take notes and build my knowledge management stuff. And I can add tags to it so I can get to it easier, things like that. And then from another note that I've been taking, I can backlist or I can reference this note. So I've got these notes connected to each other. So I would like more like ingest or like integrations with third parties to get things into Loop would be really helpful. Somebody mentioned like live databases. If you could have like something pull in from a data set, like via API. The other thing I have here is toggle lists. So I would like a new type of component that I could collapse like a bulleted list and be able to do that. Cause I use toggle lists all the time to kind of organize my stuff. Like I've got all these toggle lists, for this giant page. So it'd be nice to shrink that down. And then multi-column layouts. What this is I mentioned like custom templates. When I go into my note database and I add a new note, I have topics, key takeaways, action items, and then next to it in another column, I have my notes. That way I can be taking notes over here on the side. But if somebody if I volunteer for something, it's right here and I don't scroll up and scroll down. It's side by side because I have an ultra wide monitor. So I would like to also see multi-column page layouts to be able to put things next to each other. We were struggling with that yesterday, Andy, where like I couldn't put one picture next to another picture. They had to be on top of each other,
Yep.
You mentioned the
It
graph
might be
view.
where you use a table for that sort of thing, but
That's a good
it's gonna
point.
all
Yeah.
scroll at the same time.
Yeah, that's true. But yeah, that's a good point. You could have used a table and put a picture in each one, I guess. You talked about the graph view, that kind of like mind map neural network type of thing. The loop components, what about being able to bring things in? I think this was something, you added this, Andy, about like, what about embedding a PowerPoint slide deck into a loop component and making it so you can click through the slides, having kind of
Yes,
like real-time rendering. I don't know, videos.
Yeah,
Can you play
I'll
back
expand on
videos
that.
inline?
Not yet, no.
Okay. Yeah.
So I'm
Yeah,
just
go ahead.
thinking like in OneNote, they've updated it so like you can put a PowerPoint in your OneNote notebook and you can actually play the PowerPoint right there. It's kind of like a custom embedded web part that they created, works with like OneNote in the web. It's really helpful. Like I can just drop in a presentation, create a whole bunch of notes around it, scroll through the presentation, and I don't have to have each, all 30 slides and take up my whole notebook. It's just one little player inside of there. And I think you can do that with Word and Excel as well. And I really like that in OneNote. So I like to see that come over into the Loop world. And honestly, I'd like to even extend that. Like I mean, we have the ability to create a list inside a Loop, but like, can I bring my Microsoft list into it? Like, I already have the Microsoft list. I'm already using all the
that would do
features
your
over
database,
there. And like, I don't even necessarily like want to share it as like a Loop component, but like if I'm doing ideation in Loop and we've got, collaboration happening in there, like here's a list of like things that, this applies to, like, let me bring my Microsoft list inside of there and take advantage of the list features. Like even it's just a embedded web part.
I want to be, when that's possible, I want to be the first person to create an infinite loop within Loop. So that we're looping loops, so then it just loops and loops and loops, and then I might get myself in trouble.
Get an infinite loop. Daryl, you added channel support for Loop app
Yeah.
workspaces. So obviously Teams channels.
Yeah,
That's a big one.
everyone's screaming out for it. I mean, we've got to have it on the list, but I
Yep.
think looking at the limitations of how many people can be in a loop and collaborating, you can see why they're cautious with how they're bringing this into teams, because a team can have up to 10,000 people if you're using a full org team. What would
Yeah.
happen to Loop if you dropped it in there and people started to collab?
That's true. I added these three from Phil in the chat. So he mentioned guest access, but also anonymous access in meetings. So being able to like throw it in a meeting with like external people and stuff would be good. And then he also mentioned Power Automate support. This is something I totally echo with Phil. It would be nice if you could have Power Automate like generate components off of a custom template even would be beautiful, because then what I would do, like I mentioned way early on with the whole stand-up Scrum thing, I would like to say, all right, I'm going to make a Scrum, progress status table that's customized. And then I want it to Power Automate to post it in this channel every day at the same time. So yeah, Power Automate support would be really rad to add to that. Yeah. Marilyn said embed, just that would open up like embedding all kinds of things, so you get a real like a really like rich type of layout where you're not getting out to other tabs to see things. So anything else on the wish list, or should we bring it home?
Bring it
Copilot.
home. Bring it home.
Copilot now.
Yeah,
Copilot
give us
now?
Copilot earlier. That sounds great. So
And maybe Copilot will be the answer to like, why bring the whole Microsoft list into Loop? Why not just have Copilot go and analyze it and find certain data and then bring that into Loop?
Yep. Yeah, I'm going to add to the list here right before we move on is third-party app support.
On that,
APIs, because A-Train
the
had a thing about it. He's like, hey, remember when they made the announcement? They were showing like ServiceNow
yes,
and like, Dynamics and all this stuff that
Yep.
like never came out.
yeah. So they've got those hero partners that have built loop adaptive cards that bring that content in, and it's live and it's built on the Fluid framework. But yeah, we need to see more of that.
Yeah. Okay, so on to the delighters. For me, I think the thing that really, like, whenever you compare Loop against Notion, things like that, the things that stand out here in the middle for me with like what differentiates Microsoft is, one, being able to mention those files, like it's aware of your files because it's in the graph, because it has access to the Microsoft graph, it knows about the people, it knows about the files, it can recommend them in an intelligent way. And then also those being able to put that component wrapper around something, share it out via Word or Outlook or Teams or Whiteboard. That's kind of the real powers. Like, it's not stuck inside of the Loop application or a link to it on a web page. It's in the flow of work. It's in the context of where you already are. We mentioned the focus on accessibility, and the kudos for that around like encouraging alt text, things like that. And then mine at the bottom here is those page templates. I just wanted to show what those look like. So when you create a new page, at the bottom, they've got a few provided for you. Like, is this a project brief? Are we getting to a decision? Is it a project plan, or is it meeting notes? So if you're taking notes in a workspace for a meeting, you just click meeting notes and then use this template. It's got the date, it's got the topics, the attendees of who's there, the agenda, so everybody can collaboratively add like what they want to talk about, how long it's going to take your notes and capture your action items and your links. So it's like what I had over here in Notion. I've got the same basic components here. They've got that. It's just kind of, you're scrolling up and down, which was my minor complaint. But
As you
boy, they
created
make it
that
look beautiful.
page with that
Yeah.
template, John, just go through and create another one or undo it.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
something else about that is you click on it, it gives you a preview of what it looks like. You can then
and you can
choose
keep
clear
it.
content.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and now you've got your
Oh,
template.
it blanked it out.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a good tip, Daryl. Thank you. So
And
yeah,
there's
it had a
the
bunch
other
of fake
templates
data
as
in
well.
it. Yeah, so I was able to say like use this template, and it's got a bunch of fake stuff in here, clear content, and now that table's empty.
Yep.
Oh, that's a godsend. Thank you. That's
And
cool.
there's more templates just at the bottom. That's something.
Oh, there's
you need
other
to,
ones too.
Yeah.
I did
yeah.
not. Oh man, dude, there's a lot more. Okay, so there's 10 right now. There's a
Mhm.
project brief, and this is good. This gives you a preview of what they look like. Team decision. Here's let's get focused on one thing we're going to solve, and then what we're going to compare. We're going to vote on ideas, come up with a decision. Project planning, meeting notes. We looked at that one. Bad idea brainstorm. Build a terrible food delivery app.
What?
That's awesome. Product wiki. There's your wiki that then you could share as read only. Action heroes to assign team members to take action on tasks. So this would kind of be like a backlog buster type of thing, stand up meeting. So there's your here's what we're doing. Here's the updates, action items, issue tracker, which now you're getting into the world of like Microsoft lists, right? Because that's also a template in lists. Is kind of a bug tracker. Then problem framing. Let's work down like what's causing a problem. Let's break it down into the parts and get about solving it. Dude, that's rad. That's a pretty good start, in my opinion. I
So
like
much
that.
that dropped in the last three to 4 weeks before it went public preview. It was just mind blowing.
Yeah.
The pace at which
Like
this
they were
stuff
at the
was
end of the
appearing.
sprint.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Well, that covers that. Anything else you guys want to cover about the whole app delighter thing? We got a few questions to run through.
No, nothing else. I know that this is going to be an open loop, and we'll definitely have more conversations about it.
Yeah, for sure.
There is one thing I do want to bring
go
up,
ahead, man.
just quick. Let me
put your
share
screen
my
up.
screen real quick. So I've been mad tweeting and throwing the links in the chat.
Yeah.
And in one of the blogs, Microsoft mentions the storage for the Loop components, and it provides a link to basically office.com/mycontent. And I feel like we kind of skipped over this a little bit because we were concentrating on like the OneDrives and SharePoints of the world. But in my content, like when we drill down into that, there's all the different pages and components that we were working with today, along with like the activity in there. I know you kind of did the filter on the homepage, but this is the specific my content along the side there, and the blog article actually called that out specifically. So I just wanted to make sure we got that on the recording and mentioned that here toward the end.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, man. So take the screens away here and end it with, I think this is a really fun question. So what do you guys think it's going to look like in 3, 4, or 5 years as we kind of round this thing out?
Andy, talk about Copilot.
When Copilot gains awareness, becomes alive, I think it's going to use the graph and the Copilot service, and the Loop app is just going to build its own information for me.
That sounds pretty nice.
Well,
Daryl, what do you think?
No, I
expand on that, right? It's
yeah.
Where I would have to go and think, where do I find this and that to start forming our ideas during this meeting? It's going to be, hey, Copilot, can you pull this from a product that we're working on, conversations that we've had, reports that are about this, and just pull it together and throw it on a page for us, and we'll start working from that starting point. It'll have that awareness of all of that content and the context of where you're working. So it's going to be amazing.
Yeah. I think if I could make a prediction, I think this is going to end up being the underlying architectural structure for the rest of all of the other collaboration experiences. Yes. I think the amount of speed, the amount of like speed and fluidity that we have, I think is going to become like the new bar for how we collaborate for everything. So I think that we're going to see sooner than, like 3 years. I'd be interested also to see, like, as this overlays into like mesh, if there's going to be any kind of like dealing with 3D objects or turning these loop workspaces into drop-in spaces, perhaps, and they convert into like drop-in rooms that you can collaborate in. And, are we going to try to like merge a virtual spatial world with this, canvas area and have that be together, that maybe like the assets that are in the room, the whiteboard, the presentations, those things kind of like all dump into a collaborative canvas. Loop could be an underlying like canvas for that. It's almost like the conference table, right, that you spread everything out on.
Yeah.
That's just kind of a wild thought for years in the future.
You mentioned about like how it will extend into other apps. I'm hoping that the Office applications will get a rewrite and they'll become fluid native. So underneath it, imagine being able to not just insert a component, but the Word document itself is turn this paragraph that I've typed up in full experience Word into a component so I can share just that with people. So everything becomes fluid capable. That would be something.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I think that was a really good question to kind of end things out on. And it's been a long time for this live stream. So I did want to point out again, thanks a lot, Daryl, for joining us, especially on your Saturday morning for more than 2 hours. Everybody who's watching, scan this QR code and follow Daryl. He talks about Loop all the time. His YouTube channel is fantastic. There's a link to his YouTube channel from his Twitter account. So be sure to follow him there. And thanks a lot for coming by. And thanks for all the times that you hang out with us anyway, on our live streams.
I would be here anyway if you're covering something else, because that's
I
spend
appreciate
my Saturdays once a month. But I also want to say, like, this is the power of being able to sit down with the people who are also interested in technology and tease these details out, because the angles that we think about and the experience that we have about working with people and what they're interested in, that's how we truly pull these things apart. And I hope you don't mind, but also just throw in there, like, we do have a Microsoft Loop user group that's on LinkedIn that it's going to start ramping up now. There's an app there, right? So go there to learn about it and talk about your experiences and share some sort of these sorts of conversations that we've had today in there, so we can all learn together.
That LinkedIn user group, the Loop user group, that has like hundreds of users on it already.
Yeah,
doesn't
it's
it?
up to about 600.
Yeah, that's pretty dang big.
Yeah, it's getting bigger, awesome, man. It's sort of, understandably died off a little in terms of activity, because Loop components were, just slowly releasing, slugging out there.
But I think it got a shot in the arm this week. Holy cow. Yeah, go join that group. Go subscribe to his channel. Go follow Daryl. Awesome. Cool. I don't know what else to say. So I guess we'll just end it there.
Keep the loop open.
But, thank you guys for all the chat. This was really fun and a good time. And Andy and I will see you next month to chat about some other topic.
I'll grab that link to the user group as well. I'll drop that.
Okay, cool. Yeah, throw that in the chat.
I can't add it in the chat because I'm not in a studio.
Oh no,
but it's in private chat, so you just grab that and add it.
Yeah, I'll do it right there. Okay, so in the chat in YouTube, the last thing is that link. So thanks a lot, guys. Appreciate it. Take care. Have a great weekend.
Bye.
Take care, everybody.
All right. Bye.